evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demon Land podcast. My name is Andy, and we did it. We're premiers. We can finally breathe a sigh of relief. The fans have ridden every bump this year. We've willed every goal, celebrated every win. We deserve this premiership, and for the first time in my life, I could watch the post-Grand Final ceremony without dreaming about what it would be like for my team to be the ones receiving the accolades and the rewards. Here was my team on footy's biggest stage, being rewarded for not just an incredible game, but for a monstrous season in which we were clearly the competition leader, not only on the ladder, but the leaders of many of the competition's stats and benchmarks. We didn't pinch a premiership. We didn't get lucky. We earned and deserved this premiership. From the 22 players on the ground, to the medical sub, to the players that missed out making it into the team, to the fantastic coach and his equally incredible assistants, to the medical staff and the footy support staff, to the admin staff. I fucking love this club, and I'll never forget this day for as long as I live and breathe. Joining us tonight, long-time Demon Lander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Well, that was inspired, and we've got a premiership. Wouldn't have expected that perhaps 2 years ago. And a few consequences of that. Super Mercado is going to have to write another book or retitle his last one. The Last Hurrah is no longer The Last Hurrah. I'm going to have to change all the passwords for myself. But really, has Andy found the cure for his MFCSS? Perhaps all will be revealed in tonight's episode.
Well, two things. I'll talk about the MFCSS and then I'll talk to you about passwords in a second. George, you're referring to the MFCSS, and for new listeners, because we get new listeners all the time, that's the Melbourne Football Club supporter syndrome. Many Demon Landers use that term. It refers to the decades of disappointment Demon fans, that we've experienced over the years through finals droughts and limited success, the false dawns, the dashed hopes. It's the veil of negativity that surrounds a lot of us. And George, I'm happy to report that my MFCSS is now in remission, and I don't think the symptoms will ever truly go away without professional psychological help, because the MFCSS that I experience it's most likely a result of my own neuroses, whether it be OCD, anxiety, or an inferiority complex. But when it comes down to it, I just want my team to win and be successful, and winning the flags is a pinnacle for any footy supporter. But now I fear that because I've tasted the ultimate success, I just want more now. And I fear the MFCSS might evolve into me, chasing that dragon and the psychological war games that I play in my mind. Now I fear that winning more will never live up to the high that I experienced on Saturday night. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take it one flag at a time. Also joining us tonight, long-time contributor to Demon Land and the show, Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demon Landers. And yeah, it's good to hear you up and about. I'm up and about as well. It's pretty surreal, isn't it, to think that we're doing a grand final podcast, and I hope
premiership podcast, not just
a premiership, a post grand final podcast, and I hope your cure, or at least your remission, is in some small part to the fact that it must feel pretty good that we got you on tape last week actually tipping the Demons. So you can get rid, next year you can tip properly. You can get rid of that little quirk to think that if you tip us that we're going to, as a matter of course, if you're going to cause us to lose. So you can get rid of that one as well. Good job. Well done tipping us last week. And I think you got the Norm Smith as well. So
I did, but I went against every instinct of mine during the week. I don't know if you're a fan of Seinfeld, but there's an episode where George does the opposite of everything, doing everything. His natural instincts never worked for him, so he just went to the opposite, and then he started having success. So I did a lot of those things unprompted by anyone or even Seinfeld show of in my own life. I did things like I shaved midweek, not fully, just kept a bit of stubble because I'm not crazy and don't want to totally jinx us. I had my hair cut, which has always been a no. These are just little neuroses that I have, and I did all those things. I give myself haircuts. I didn't break isolation.
I'm so glad, Andy, that we won. For, if no other reason than I actually listened to the last couple of minutes of the show from last week because I wanted to hear what your tip was. Your hesitation to actually make it. It took about 2 minutes for you to arrive at. Okay, no, I think we've got a chance.
No, I knew we. You know what? In the heart of hearts, I knew they were the team I was worried about most. But I could envision us winning. It was never. I wasn't total MFC assessing out.
But it's not quite the same thing as I could envision them winning as I think we're going to win. But you got there in the end.
No, when I say envision, I mean that I think we can. There's a genuine chance.
That's the weasel word. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm not ever going to come here. But that just the MFCSS thing. I don't think it'll ever truly go away. And it's not. All right, we've had the good thing happen, but just me wanting to win. I want to win every week. Yeah. I know it's not possible. We can't win every week, every game, but all I want to do is just win every week. We've got actually a very special person calling into the show, and I know he's probably wanted to be on the show for a long time, but we have him on the air now. Grapeviney, good evening. How are you feeling?
A little bit stunned still, to be honest, Andy. It's been, coming up to sort of 48 hours now. I've watched the replay 3 times in full and the second half another few times on its own. I'm sort of slowly fading, I've got to admit, 48 hours on.
What time did you get to bed on the night? Because I couldn't get to bed until like 5 a.m. I had adrenaline coursing through my veins. I wanted to read everything on Twitter, on whatever news articles I could get on Demonland. I was
much the same. Yeah, look, I had a cracking headache at the end of the night. I didn't drink anything. I didn't shout at the TV, but the tension, inside was just incredible, and so. I felt pretty ordinary by the end of it, but I did. The replay didn't come on Fox until probably about midnight, and I watched it once through then, and so I guess that finished just sort of after 2. But there was another hour or so after that before I hit the hay, I've got to admit, and I was up a few hours later because I was just so excited I couldn't stay asleep.
I mean, you have the same journey as I've had. We grew up together. So how does it feel for you? I mean, you've gone through every bump, every up and down that I have, and many of our Demon fans, but I've been by your side throughout that whole time. So how do you feel about us finally tasting premiership glory?
On the night, there was really, in amongst all the joy and satisfaction, and there was a lot of that and disbelief at the nature of the performance, there was just an overwhelming sense of relief. I think we were such a dominant side this year and so dominant in our finals that, there's no such thing as fair in footy, but we were as close as you could come to deserving of the premiership, and so I sort of felt that pressure that we needed to seal the deal and bring it home, and look, they did it. It's really just extraordinary. You and I discussed that I might come on the podcast, return to the panel tonight, but the truth be told is 48 hours on, I'm still speechless about what I've seen, and despite watching the replay multiple times, I can't quite comprehend what's happened, and I'm very much looking forward to yours and George's and Dinman's analyses of the game, because it turned multiple times, and I'm particularly interested in the question of how close we were to losing, and how many goals more in the third would it have taken for the Bulldogs to put the game beyond reach, because momentum's a funny thing in football, and they weren't far off they weren't far off sealing the deal themselves.
Yeah, I thought if they, and we'll discuss it when we discuss the third quarter a bit later on, but my feel is that had they piled on one, definitely two, it would have been all over, I think. I don't know if we could have come back mentally from that, but this team seems to be able to do that. Look what we did against Geelong, but in a grand final, it's a different story, but we did it.
Inman made a very good point in the post-match thread that even though the scoreboard didn't reflect it in the third quarter, we did get the game back on our terms to some extent, even sort of quite early after the break, but
we just
didn't
couldn't
quite
goals.
get the results for it. But, they delivered.
We'll definitely discuss that, great. But, yeah, I just think our form and their lack of run, we are so fit. And watching the captains run on the Friday was terrific. They look even fitter now. They look incredibly cut. They look like 400-metre runners, the whole team. It's amazing how, chiseled they look. To the answer, who knows what, but I don't think they were ever going to stretch it to the point where we couldn't win. They would have had to get seriously, I reckon, get out to a 5-6 goal lead and us to have, maybe 5 goals. 5 goals is the sort of statistical thing that it's hard to come back from 30 points down. That doesn't happen very often. But our scoring power, and we'll get to it, I guess, but it's part of my frustration is aren't people watching what's happened? We're averaging, our second half in the last month is extraordinary. The numbers we are kicked in the last month, and people seem to think each one of them's an event in isolation. You put them all together, and then suddenly, from a form perspective, you've got a team who can score. We just did it to Geelong the fortnight previously, for Pete's sake, and everyone thinks, well, that's such an outlier of an event. Well, we've done it twice now. If is that still an outlier? No, it's how we've engineered it to play at this end of the season. So from my perspective obviously nerves would have come into it, but as I said, we'll get to it. But I actually think that the problem was that for the Dogs is they didn't score enough. They needed to get out to a 6-goal lead. They needed to get on their bike, and they played into our hands, I reckon, they slowed it down as well for fear of our ability to put on score.
Just while we're talking about it, because I'll forget it later, you talk about our last half. The last 4 matches of this season, so the 3 finals and the Geelong match, our last half, we've kicked 39-19, 253 to 10-11-71. So we've nearly won by 200 points against quality opposition. These are final top 4 teams.
Exactly. And so that's my point. So is each one of those events an anomaly? Well, maybe one of them is, but not 4 in a row. That's a pattern. And so why would you, that's what the sort of narrative about how incredible the preliminary final was seems to me is sort of illogical, because people were saying, I was hearing commentators say, it's not possible for us to replicate that. It's like, maybe it's a bad thing that we played so well, because, we've played our really good game. That doesn't make any sense. In a form line, you keep building. And so more logic, it would be that we're just as likely to repeat it as to not repeat it. And I think we even played better in that last quarter and a half, if possible, than in the prelim.
Andy, you've had some wonderful guests on the show, not just this year, but since the podcast's been up and running. I'm just wondering, do you think you're a chance of getting the Premiership Cup on? Because I saw it give an interview to Gus and Gorney.
Well,
that is good talent.
Technically, we could do it right now based on the interview that I saw. We'll just ask you, how does it feel coming home to Melbourne? That's what I'm really hoping that, and I know it'll happen once things open up in Victoria. We'll start to be able to gather together, and I'm sure the club will put something on. I hope it's something that we can all enjoy, no matter what it is, but get together and be able to join and hug each other, or socially distance if that's what the health dictates. But I can't wait.
Amen to that. I'm going to sign off now. I look forward to you guys hopefully explaining to me what happened on the weekend, because I'm still baffled by it all.
Yeah, I'm baffled too, so I'm hoping these guys have some answers. That's what they're there for. I'm just the host of this show. But yeah, we'll get into it. Thank you, Great Viney, and we'll chat with you soon.
See you at the MCG celebrating soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good on you, Great Viney.
Good on you.
That was a long-time co-host, Great Viney, and we'll get him back on the show soon. Before we talk about how everyone else can come and contact us, George, you mentioned passwords. Now, a funny thing happened the day on the Sunday. My mum called me up. She said the Wi-Fi passwords at their house isn't working. I said, "What do you mean it's not working? It's not working. It's not connecting. Whatever." Anyway, the password, and it doesn't matter now because I've changed it, was Demons 1964. It would not work anymore. Doesn't matter what we did to change it, works. So now it's Demons 2021. So if you want to come to our parents' house and use their Wi-Fi, you're welcome to if you can find out where they live.
That's spooky, Andy.
How spooky is that? And it's a true story. You can, George, Whispering Jack, you can ask him. Absolute true story. I don't know what it was. I thought it was user error because it's my parents, but it wasn't.
Well, George, I'm the same. I've got any number of variations of 1964 in my passports. It's like 1859 and 1964. 1859, of course, being when 1858. Some people say, others say 1859, when we became a club, the oldest football club in the world. So, and now we've won our 13th flag. How's that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The only thing we have to worry about now, curse-wise, is 13 an unlucky number. Let's just get past 13 so we don't even have to have that discussion. So.
Well, hopefully it's sooner rather than later, because I can't, if I'm 88 before our next one, it's not good. If you would like to join us tonight, you can give us a call on 0390163666, or you can Skype us at Demonland31. That's 0390163666. You can join us in the chat room at demonland.com/podcast. And while we're happy to take your calls, and we do want to hear from you and hear your thoughts and stories about the glorious night, I can only take one call at a time. If I pick up, I'll have your audio down whilst whichever one of my co-hosts or myself is speaking. When we finish our thoughts, I'll try to bring you on at the appropriate time. So please, if you're just hanging on and just hearing us, just be patient until I get to you. If you happen to call while someone else is waiting, you'll either get the engaged signal or just ring out. I'm not ignoring you. Just try calling back a bit later on, and I'll pick up when I can, and if I can, because I don't want to kick the person off. Or you can join people together, but then I've got no control over the audio of whoever's not talking. So if it's loud in the background, so please understand, I'm not ignoring. I will bring people on as I can get to them. So here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to go quarter by quarter and discuss how the game played out, and then we're going to go player by player and discuss their match. At some point in a few weeks' time, or maybe even next week, we'll do some kind of season review where we'll discuss each player and perhaps some key matches, or maybe all the matches. We'll see. Well, the boys and I will discuss the best way to do that. Tonight's going to be a monster show that befits the incredible performance that our beloved Demons put on for us. We'll attempt to do it justice, and I hope that we hit all the right notes. Before we dive into our commentary on the match and how it played out, I suppose this is a great opportunity to ask you guys, my co-hosts, how you're feeling. What are your thoughts on winning the flag? What does it mean to you? And how did you watch it? How did you celebrate? George, I'll start with you.
Andy, I'll, apart from the sheer joy and excitement that probably everybody listening to this and every Demons fan has experienced as a result of this, I really feel there's a lot more to come in the background that people will only appreciate in the coming months and even years. While it was great for me and for every Demon fan, I think that the club as a whole are going to benefit just enormously from this. Firstly, from the financial aspect. I heard Kate Roffey today say that they'd sold $1 million worth of merchandise in the last 36 hours.
Most of that was from me, by the way.
And I think there's going to be a little bit more to come. So I've been doing my bit as well.
I'm the biggest sucker. They could slap anything on anything and I'll buy it.
Yeah, and we haven't even got to the stage of having a post-match get-together for all of us at the MCG. I'm sure they'll sell another $1 million on that day alone. So, that's one of the positives for the club. Membership next year, no doubt, will absolutely go through the roof. So all you people with reserve seats, you better get your money in quickly, because somebody else is going to grab your seat if you don't front up pretty soon with that. But I think there's more to it than simply all this joy. We'll see players over the coming trade period attracted to a now successful club. They know where we're heading. We're the place to be. At more grassroots levels, all those kids at Auskick who've been wearing Hawthorn jumpers for the last couple of years because they're successful, you'll start to see the kids now in Melbourne Footy Club gear, and that's going to solve this problem that we've had for the last 57 years of not actually having generations of kids supporting them. But even those kids who are almost lost to us, whose parents had been Demon supporters and had signed up their kids, now those kids who might have drifted away are going to come back to the club. So all round, this will do a great thing for the club in terms of membership and the people who want to be part of this again. I'm reminded of Brendan Gale when he first started at Richmond, and everybody laughed at him, and when he came out with a strategic plan to win premierships and get 75,000 members through the doors in the coming years, and now they're well over 100,000 members, and they've got 3 premiership cups sitting in their display cabinets. And a couple of years ago we did the same sort of thing with a strategic plan, and I'm sure people laughed at that as well when Gary Pert came out and said, well, we're going to have 75,000 members by the end of 2023, and we're going to have 50k people turning up to matches to watch the Melbourne Footy Club home games. We're going to deliver $4 million profit over 4 years, and we're going to have 1 AFL premiership and 1 AFLW premiership. Well, I reckon all of those things are going to be in place by the end of this year, next year certainly. We will have 75,000 members very quickly. People will be turning up in their droves. We're going to get those profits that the club desires, and all we've got to do now is for the women's team to top off this coming season with a premiership of their own, and the whole lot's been completed a year early. So very excited about the possibilities for the club.
And personally, how do you feel? I know there's great things coming for the club, but I want to hear some emotion, George.
Emotion. The emotion is easy to sum up. My poor dog didn't know what to do on the night. I was yelling, screaming, jumping around the room, and she thought something was seriously wrong with me. There probably is. But I was very, very excited on the night, so which is probably unusual for me. People think I'm pretty conservative and withdrawn sort of thing. But no, I was dancing around the lounge room, so I'm sure there's plenty of evidence of other people throughout the Demons community doing exactly the same.
Absolutely. B-Man, before we get on to you, we do have a caller on the phone. Welcome to the Premiership podcast. Who am I talking to?
You would be talking to Colin B. Flaubert.
Colin, very nice to talk to you. How are you feeling?
Well, yeah, it's kind of been a bit of a blur the last couple of days. I'm probably not, Robinson Crusoe in saying this, but I think my productivity basically at work was somewhat down today because I guess as Grapeviney was saying a little bit earlier, it all just really does feel so surreal. I think, since I've started following Melbourne in 1989, I've kind of said it in the forums, but it almost feels like as a Melbourne supporter, you've had a kind of an imposter syndrome over, X amount of years that, this kind of stuff was always meant to happen to other clubs. It was never, ever meant to happen to us. And I think, when I think we got up by about 42 points, it started to get a little bit more real. And I I posted on social media at time, here come the waterworks, and I pretty much, as I predicted, I did, shed a bit of a tear, and I'm probably looking forward to the noise complaint from the tenant management agency at the apartment block I live here in Japan, because I think, I kind of did get fairly worked up. But, probably, a lot of how I was feeling was probably not alien to a lot of you fellas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine the culture from where you're living at the moment, that type of emotion's probably not expressing that type of emotion is frowned upon, I guess. And we all feel the same. I mean, it's just incredible. I'm speechless at times about it. I just love it.
Colin, it's interesting because one of the things for me, Andy, is, I've imagined it for so long. Like, you got your mates who barrack in the 70s and 80s, it was Hawthorn and, North Melbourne and, then Essendon and, bloody even Carlton winning, and then Richmond in 81. And then, of course, in more recent times, and then the Doggies breaking their drought. And, you see it and sort of, you think about it. So I've thought about it ever since I was little. What would it be like to win it? And as I became an adult, I'll be like, all right, I'll be partying for days. It'll be crazy. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I stopped drinking. I thought I'll wait till the end of the pandemic to start again. So I haven't been drinking. And of course, didn't go out and celebrate in Melbourne. So it's not much different to Japan in the sense that it was really contained here and by myself. It was not how I'd imagined it. But in a funny way, for me, it didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like I'd missed something. It was an incredible season. And in some ways it felt, I don't know whether it felt even more intense because it was just me watching the game, and I've watched pretty much all of the games all season by myself. And so, it was a much different experience to what I'd always had it in my mind that it would be like.
Yeah,
but
no less
sometimes good.
No less rewarding, I guess, because
less rewarding at all.
We were robbed of that celebration with either mates or extended family, or even the next day going to the club and cheering with the fans, and we'll get that. Hopefully, I'm sure we'll get that.
We'll get that, and I think I've been thinking about this today. I think that actually is. There's something special about that. Next year, no matter what happens, we're going to be, the vaccination rates and all of that will mean that there'll be games at the G and finals at the G and all of that stuff. So we'll be going to the footy again next season. We'll make finals next season. Of course, everything has to go right to be back in this position. I don't want to, speaking of Carlton, water and bridges and all of those things. But it means that next year is going to feel, I don't know, it's going to feel more special than it almost ever could have. And so maybe it's destiny in a way, is that it means that next season is going to be special in a way that it wouldn't have been if it weren't for the travails of this season and not being able to see the games, and in particular not being able to see finals, because, I can't wait to see a final at the MCG this time next year, and I'm sure it will happen.
I can imagine, this is getting very far, but imagine, we get to go to the G and watch a premiership. And I know so much water to go under the bridge. It's getting ahead of yourself, but I'm just saying, imagine. It would be absolutely incredible. It'd be 10 times whatever we experience, and what I experienced the other day was in the stratosphere.
Yeah.
So, I'll be man. Colin, is there anything else? We'll move on otherwise.
Well, there's a couple of things actually I did want to. Well, one was more of a statement to basically the team, and I've probably mentioned it in a thread on Demonland that I do a podcast of my own. I just thought I wanted to call in because I actually wanted to call in a couple of weeks ago to say this, but just to congratulate you on the quality of the podcast that you've been doing this year. And it kind of actually will lead into my second point, but I do know that, it's when you're making a podcast, there's so many different kinds of considerations you put in. I guess, there's certain people who might like a certain form of analysis or a certain form of presentation. And the fact that you guys do this, just off the cuff and live, is really, really admirable, because it really isn't as easy, as people might think it is. So I just wanted to firstly say that.
I'll just add, it's not all off the cuff. I do a lot of preparation for it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, there's also, I know, but, there is a show, there's a running sheet. I get that.
Yeah.
But it's probably more so, I'm probably also thinking, and I'm not going to turn this into a plug for myself, but I just know, when I do my own podcast, I do it completely pre-recorded, just so I don't muck anything up at all. Yeah. So that part that you do basically have a running sheet, you do it fairly spontaneously, is to be admired. But I guess thinking what we were talking about, with the quality of the analysis, and this actually is talking about the game more so than anything else. Leading into the grand final, and I was actually having a discussion with my brother who supports Collingwood, and we were texting before the game, and he was telling me a bit about Matthew Lloyd and some of the commentary he was putting in regards to the supposed plan of how the Bulldogs, well, not just their rucks, but their entire team, were going to rough up Maxi, and somehow that was going to be the panacea to everything that, which would stop us into the grand final. And I was kind of thinking, coming home from work today, about, I guess, George and Binman, a lot of their analysis, and, how considered and, articulate and thought out it is, versus a lot of the stuff that was coming out of the media leading into the grand final. Now, I actually like Matthew Lloyd as a commentator, and, as a former player commentator, he's usually fairly measured. But I felt that, there was more of this idea to set up a narrative more so than analysis leading into the grand final, because I'd spoken, to other people who'd put this theory to me that, they're just going to go at Max and they're going to rough him up and it'll unsettle us. But to me, that was a really, really silly, way of looking at things, because the game they looked at beforehand, which supposedly where Max had been, roughed up and thrown off his game and we lost, what people didn't consider was that he was actually playing with boils up his leg, number one. Number two, we didn't have Jackson back then. So, they can spend all their time, chasing Max around like absolute galoots trying to hurt him, but when, trying to punch him. But, we just throw Jackson back at the ruck, move Max up to the, as a resting forward, and therefore you counteract that problem. And the third thing as well is this idea that Max, doesn't get, smashed every single game anyway, is like a complete furphy as well. Like, I don't know as many blokes, who cop as many whacks to the back of the head, marking up the wing or in flanks. So, but I kind of felt like, I've probably gone off a bit of a rant there, but I felt, that kind of superficiality was kind of almost intentionally delved into to sell this narrative that, all they have to do is this, to kind of, to appeal to kind of maybe not as articulate a football follower. I just wanted to know what you guys actually thought about, that narrative leading into the game.
Emmanuel, I know you're a fan of commentators.
Well, great minds and all of that, Colin, because on speaking of running sheets, because I didn't want to go negative early, and he's put it second to last, which makes a lot of sense, is that I want to have my rant about the so-called experts, and that's one of them. I mean, I won't rant now because then I won't stop. But
yeah, we'll cover that later.
Sorry to muck up your running sheet.
No, not at all. But I totally agree. I mean, it's like, yeah, hashtag don't get me started. It just drives me nuts because it's, the football media is so dominated by ex-footballers and they're not, it's hard to know what they're doing, let alone, whether it's analysis or review or preview. And, it was just, more frustrating for me. I stopped watching Footy Classified. I don't mind Matt Lloyd either, but I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do it? They don't ever do it. Why would they suddenly do it now? And it's, but the other narrative, speaking of narratives, there are a whole bunch of narratives that were driving me nuts. One of which was Beveridge is some sort of tactical savant. And he had a shocker. Yeah. Arguably, he had a shocking tactical game because, what was the deal allowing 4 centre clearances? That's like a total no-no. Like, how did he respond? He was coming down to the bench at that time. Even the way that they allowed Jackson, that was a smart tactical move, which, part of the thing about the narrative coming in is that Goody flies under the radar. No one credits him for anything, basically, in the media, in terms of his tactical ability. Very rarely does it get pointed out. But the move to Jackson, he's very clever, good one. Having Jackson into the ruck, we'll talk about it later, but was a move that he did in, you remember the North Melbourne game? When we needed to get back into that game, what did he do? He put Jackson into the ruck for almost a full quarter. So it's a bit like David King bangs on about this idea of don't get beaten by what you know. Well, the bloody commentators should have known that there's a good chance we're going to do that. We've done it once already this season, and it completely muddled them up because there's so much emphasis on how they're going to deal with Max. Well, what does Goody do? Takes him out of the equation, and suddenly Martin's got to deal with a fella who can jump over the top of him, not just wrestle him. So, that whole us against them thing that Beveridge played, I just think that you make a good point about the media just trying to create narratives all the time rather than just doing which is fine from Channel 7 if you want to pump it up and have a big theatrical thing, that's fine. But not for the so-called experts who whose job it is to try and help people understand what's coming, not sell a narrative about what's his name's hair or Bailey Smith's mullet or, Beveridge's tactical genius or the fact he's a poet or, all of that stuff is, it's got its place, but it seems like it's 90% of the coverage. So, yeah.
Well, you do have to remember that within the AFL media, I think the last time I heard there were about 750 journalists all getting a job in that area. And in this particular case, you're down to 2 teams for the grand final, and they're on the other side of the country. So there's all these people who are quite literally looking for a narrative or a line to keep themselves relevant. And the other, as Bin Man said, unfortunately, it's populated by an awful lot of ex-footballers who've got zero coaching experience and only know how to kick a piece of leather. They're not the ones who need to be who are qualified or even understand what goes into how that piece of leather moves around the ground or the stories that go on in the background. They're just not looking deep enough. So it's not surprising that we finish up with this situation, but hey, it's what we've got and we've got to keep putting up with them.
All right, we've got to move on here. Colin, thank you very much for calling and enjoy the premiership, buddy.
I definitely will, and thank you again for the podcast this year. Much appreciated, especially for us overseas, like people like Terence and myself.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for. So enjoy it, soak it up, and
good on you, fellas.
Chat with you soon. It was Colin. Great to talk to him. We did have another caller call in while Colin was on the phone. Give a call. We're going to move it. We're going to move it on now. Bin Man, how did you feel, mate? What are your thoughts? Winning the flag. What does it mean to you? And how were the celebrations at the Bin Man household?
Yeah, I had a Zoom call with fans of Melbourne through the finals, and then we did afterwards. So that was really good to be able to share that pre-match and afterwards to have, there was a dozen of us at different times and to have that sort of vibe. That was really good to, but after the game, I had a Zoom session. So we made it before we voted to do this, whether it's bad luck or not, to make a meeting for a celebration.
Oh, so you're now going into my territory. Yeah.
Well, I put it to people. That's true. I am going into your territory. I know what you would have said. It said, no, definitely don't. So, and afterwards, I was just stunned. I was like, I just couldn't believe what had just happened. Not that we'd won, but the manner of it. I mean, we'll get into it, obviously, but that was just incredible. It was just a shot of adrenaline after, like, to have that thought, geez, 19 points, what's going on here, to 40 minutes later going, good Lord, we've just won by 74 points and running away. I'm a bit like Grape, sort of stunned, but it was I had the day off today and took the day off ahead of it and did some work around the house and painting and listened to the SEN call, and it was awesome. It was just awesome. And probably, to be honest, I was sort of it's just been such a long time, and so long have I looked forward to this event. And of course, as we've talked about a lot, it's not how it's looked. It's in Perth. I thought that it was just looked awesome. I was so happy for the players that it was in a proper stadium and the whole bells and whistles. I was so proud of the club. Like, I don't think I've ever been as proud of anything other, outside my children, and pretty much that's it. I thought, I just felt they did a great job at connecting. I think that it felt relief is probably a bit like Grape was probably the main thing that came. And then, it was a weird thing because we're kicking so many goals. I was wondering whether, the tears, I sort of had tears sometimes and not, but really laughing almost. And then, just before I came on the show, just before tonight, I watched the first 10 minutes of 360, and they have a montage, and oh, good Lord, then I started tearing up. So it feels like a long time of supporting the club. And one of the things later when I ran, I don't want to rant too much and make it negative, is more that it actually was in my mind about how often you're sort of taken on board the criticism of the club, and it's not just that you follow a club that struggles. It's the sort of, I guess having 40, 50 years of being in the situation of following a team and being laughed at about it, being a butt of jokes, I could have been champions and all of that stuff, it's sort of, to a degree, water off a duck's back. But some of that came up for me. It's like, we're here, and I was reflecting on that idea that Pert raised about us being a power club. I thought, you know what, we could be. This team is an awesome team. The other thing for me, sort of weird emotion, was, one, as I've been saying, is that I've been trying to sort of look at it objectively in terms of our chances. And I'm positive that when the history books are out, they're already starting to say it. That, dynasty and all of that stuff is people will reassess it and go, right, they were far better than any other team. And all the results showed it. So, that's a weird that hasn't been discussed. And the reason it hasn't been discussed is because of that history. People can't quite get it in their heads that this team is as good as it is. So they've written this fairy tale narrative as opposed to a cold-blooded look at it saying, well, this team is just too good for anyone as it stands right at this moment. So that's sort of but the part leaving that aside is also that I couldn't help kept on having this recurring thought that this is destined to be, and that sounds a bit mystical or whatever, but that's how I felt. And so I felt like even when we were down, I thought we're still going to win this, and I felt like that all season. And I think back to the round 23 game. I can't recall ever having an emotion like that in a game of footy, and I've been to lots of games of footy, lots of close results and all of that stuff, and it felt like that destiny was there, and that was a really powerful feeling. And so it felt like a sort of a natural culmination of all of that. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was sort of, I wasn't surprised or I wasn't shocked, or so that sort of, it was a weird emotion because it felt like it was this was destined to be. It was going to happen, and it did.
Excellent. We have another caller on the line. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Yeah, my name's Noah, long-time demon sufferer, and I think I've got rid of my MFCSS on Saturday, so I think it's cured. But I'd just like to tell you guys you do a really great podcast.
Thank you very much. I didn't catch your name at the start. You broke up.
Sorry, my name's Noah.
Oh, Noah. How you go, mate? How are you feeling?
I'm in disbelief. I kind of pinch myself a bit because I guess, having, been a supporter for about 30 plus years, I kind of feel, we're not going to win the game. And when we came back after that second quarter, it was just a bit weird. Like I was in a weird dream, and but Petrarca, I think Jimmy Steins must have been, listening, coming down from the heavens and gave him some special spell, because he was amazing. He just really whipped the team up and got us there, as well as Maxi.
It's funny that you say you had to feel like you had to wake yourself up. I didn't want to go to sleep at night for fear that I would wake up and it would all be a dream. So, George, how's that for some MFCSS? I kept thinking I've got to be in a dream. Some dreams just feel so real, and you wake up and it's like, oh my God, that was a dream. That's what I felt like. I didn't, it's a weird feeling. But, what else?
So the question I just wanted to ask you guys, I mean, we've seen how well Melbourne's done this year, and especially with COVID, it's probably the one thing that's brought me much joy out of this year, living in Melbourne. Do you think the media next year will actually treat us with a bit of respect, which they never really have? I just want to know the guys' opinions just after reflecting this year.
Well, I won't ask Bim Man because I know exactly what he'll say. So, George, George will start. Bim Man, you can go next.
That's a hard one. I don't know. I'm not very good at reading the future, and I certainly don't bet on it like other people. But of course, they'll pile on the bandwagon. You've already seen, even in the newspapers, spreads of commentary on the team and how they've done this year. So. It's only to be expected that everybody will be on the bandwagon early next year. Let's see after the first couple of games.
Well, the knives will come out if there's a few losses early.
Yeah. Or again, if there's a few wins, you'll just see exactly like the previous caller said. There's so many people whose jobs depend on creating narratives within the industry to keep themselves relevant. It's not going to be unexpected. Just got to wait and see, but it's going to be very hard for them to run all the stories about, the long-suffering supporters and the 57-year drought and all those stories. They're going to have to find something new to talk about.
Big man.
Yeah, I think they'll have to look at Carlton.
Let's hope.
I actually think. I mean, I think what will happen is that they'll swing to the other extreme. Because it's like they can't have a middle ground. But the short answer is yes, I think they will, in the sense that, it's not just, that's what I keep talking about. This is not a fluke, and it's not, this is not a sort of something that's going to be an event, arguably a bit like 2016 for the Doggies. They didn't have all the ducks in a row and the list in place. We're strong off field. We're getting stronger. Kate Roffey is doing a terrific job. There seems to have been a fantastic ability to bring the energy of a whole bunch of people together, ex-players, and we're sorted. We've got a ground coming up that's being built, so hopefully that will get sorted in terms of our training facilities. We will build on the back of this next year, so the club will be able to really leverage this in terms of strength. That George has talked about that financial stuff before, and I reckon that's where we'll start to get the sort of the way that they talk about Richmond, which is what I mean by swinging the other way. Like, it drives me nuts how much they gloss over Richmond's problems, in terms of some of that stuff. So I think they will. What will frustrate me no end, and that's why I wanted to put it on the run thing tonight, is people who were hammering us 6 months ago, as George was saying, will suddenly be on the bandwagon as if they never had that position. Like, they won't return to it. If, it's ground zero 2022 season. I wasn't one of the people in 2019 saying that they were hopeless and we didn't trust them, and 2018 was an outlier. That they just won't ever go backwards. That's what drives me nuts. So often the commentators and so-called experts make these statements and never get called on it. No one calls them on it. So if they're wrong, it doesn't really matter. They can just say something as stupid as Matt Lloyd says, that they're going to go the knuckle, and no one says anything about it. So I think that, we will be, but I'll be watching out for those turncoats.
All right, thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
We'll move it on. Thank you for your call.
Good on you, Noah. Go D's.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Thank you. Go D's.
That was Noah. Thank you for your call. So personally, how before we get into all the match stuff, and I said it's going to be a bumper show. If you don't want to call us like Noah did, 0390163666. Understand that if we're in the middle of something, I'll pick it up, and you just have to wait patiently till we bring you on. If we've got someone on the line already and you ring, it might just ring out or be engaged. Just keep trying again, and we'll get you on when we can. But yeah, we've got to try and keep it moving along so you can ask your questions, say your story. We love hearing it, so we want to hear it. But yeah, we'll try and move it on. I posted this on Twitter and on the Demonland Facebook page today, just about my feelings about not being able to go to the game. You know, the fact that we couldn't go to the game, and I usually go to the footy with my old man, my brother and my nephews, and during lockdown I've been watching games all by myself, I've thoroughly enjoyed the experience, the routine of having the same feed during the pre-game whilst watching whatever they're dishing up on TV, and then watching the game alone. And, you know, I've mentioned before, I'm a tad OCD and superstitious, so I didn't want to break that routine. So for the grand final, my wife and my 3 girls, they were downstairs cheering on, and I'd go down and sort of, you know, debrief with them at every break, and then slink back to my man cave to watch the game solo. And I'm a nervous wreck, as you know, watching the footy, and even when we're a long way up, I'm thinking the worst, and I'm working through those mental demons, as you've sort of gone with me on that journey along the way. It's almost vanquished, but still quite there. It wasn't until there was about 6 or 7 minutes left that I sent out the SMS to my wife that they could come on up, because I really wanted to experience this moment with them. They're obviously not as passionate as me when it comes to footy, but my girls understand how important this was for me and how much I've yearned for this day since my childhood, and to see their excitement, not just for the D's, but because of what it meant to me, that just got me all the more emotional. And when the final siren rang, it was really special for me to experience that moment together with them as a family, because that is the moment in time that if I had been at the game, I wouldn't have got to experience what I experienced with them. And that would have been a huge loss that I would never have even realised that I had missed. And don't get me wrong, I would have given my right nut to be at the game, and therefore obviously had missed that experience. And I truly hope that in my lifetime I do get to taste that premiership glory live at the G, with all the fans and the screaming and the almost the delirium and almost passing out after Clary kicks a goal on the run and straight out of the centre. Like I nearly faint sometimes because of my excitement, and I hope I get that. But you know, and for a long time this year I was resigned to the fact that I wouldn't be there, and I had made peace with that. But the silver lining was that moment that I otherwise would not have had to share with the 4 other loves of my life, and it was such a magical moment, and it's not something I'll ever forget or ever take for granted. It was just fantastic. So that there was something good to come out of COVID and not being forced to be at home. Not that I don't want to be at home with my family, but that I couldn't go to the footy. I got to experience this moment that I didn't realise I wouldn't have had that, and it was so good. They were jumping up, and they don't love footy the way I love footy. They love it because it makes me happy, and they love the results and Melbourne winning. My oldest is 12. I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. So, it was just fantastic. So that's my story. I thought I'll get that out there.
That's awesome, Andy. Totally awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. So
and they might come to the footy with you next year. They might be more interested in footy now.
Well, it was. I took my youngest one to the footy this year, and she enjoyed it. But then sort of COVID came. We had sort of limits with how many could come, and Anyway, hopefully it does get them on board. And I'll just say, I posted also this on Twitter the other day. My youngest, who's a Disney princess of a girl, slept in a Melbourne jumper last night. And I said, that's a huge win for the Melbourne Football Club.
And that's exactly what Gary Pert was talking about. And George was talking about when he was talking about his feelings, he went to the financials. So that's
well, I'm just.
But he's right. Like in terms of that's how you get people on board. But that's why it's so important that this isn't a once-off thing.
It is.
You need a sustained period of success to really build that next generation, because that's what the Hawks, all my mates who are Hawks fans, it was all on the back of jumping on the bandwagon in 1977 and 78 and in that period.
And I see I've got some younger nephews than the ones that I go the footy with. I've got some younger ones, sort of 8 and 6, and they're just mad, Melbourne. They set the timer on their iPads to when the game's going to start. And I know I've got some Carlton supporter friends who have kids, and because they're not doing well, their kids are losing interest. They don't want to go. And I know when I first started taking my eldest daughter to the footy, we were crap and she just didn't want to go because there wasn't that thing. So, yeah, success does you do need sort of that sustained period of success. We do have another caller on the phone. I'll bring them on now. Welcome to the Dreamland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Yeah, g'day. I haven't signed in for a while, but I was known as Dommy Gun.
Oh, g'day, Dommy Gun. How you going?
Yeah, not too bad. I won't keep this too long, so you're probably going to get at least another 20 callers over the remainder of the night. So I'll keep it going very quickly. This is just more of a thing, just for a bit of a giggle. I haven't really found it anywhere apart from my brother telling me, but for those who have got a spot for the Norm Smith curse, I just recently found out he died aged 57.
Ooh.
We broke a 57-year drought.
We did.
And in the last quarter, guess how many points we scored?
Oh,
57.
I'll say 57 because that's the theme.
Yep.
Wow.
How's that?
Well,
for all the superstitious ones out there, get your heart out.
There's another part of that whole Bambino curse. The Bambino curse, which is the Babe Ruth curse for the Red Sox.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this. There's a few different reasons they think that curse was broken, but one of them was there was a foul ball that was hit out into the stands and it hit one of their supporters and broke his front teeth. It came out and there was blood everywhere. And it was sort of from that day on, that was the beginning of their curse being broken. I don't know all the details to it, but it's documented online. Now, when Max Gawn was tackled and thrown to the ground quite violently, which probably might have been a free kick, some might disagree, by Caleb Daniel. Yep. He actually had a bit of blood on his, if you notice, on his little, above his sort of eyebrow there.
Forehead, yep.
Yeah, he had sort of a scrape, sort of that blood scrape. But for me, that was the drawing of the blood. And from that point on, we kicked 16 goals for. That was from the 16-minute mark or for 16 minutes to go, whatever. 16 goals for to 1 goal one. That was the start. Blood was drawn. That was the end of the Norm Smith curse. So I'm going to take that one to the bank.
Well, so Why You Little in the chat rooms noted this, and I've heard variations on this theme this week, and I quite like the idea that the earthquake we experienced was Norm Smith related and him waking up or deciding enough.
I got something else with that. Do you know where the epicenter of that earthquake originated?
Well, not the J.
Mount Buller. So the skiing jokes and all that, we're not going to the snow anytime soon. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought the earthquake was actually the lid coming off for me. That's when I knew that the lid was off.
So there you go. All right. Thank you, Dommy Gunn. We appreciate the call and that Norm Smith, that bit of trivia. I'll go check all your calculations to see if you're right.
Another nice little. Thanks, Dommy Gunn.
Thanks, Dommy Gunn.
Another nice little number thing was they scored 10-6-66. So when you look at it, if you take the 10 off, you've got the nice 666 thing there for the scoreline.
Before we go into the first portion of our show, an hour into it already, it's going to be a long one, folks. Enjoy it while you're walking. You got plenty of time until the Marsh series to just have a listen to it. I might play this bit of audio I've got of Jack Rewalt because it relates to you of what you said about sort of getting the young kids and linking generations and generations. He said it on Fox Footy actually before the game, but it was about him wanting us to win for this reason.
I really want this football club to win this premiership for the fact that it connects generations, and for the Richmond faithful, they were obviously a successful football club. 1980 was the last premiership before 2017, and there's a whole generation of fans that were born in the 1970s that became Richmond people, and then they had kids and they made them become Richmond people, and they didn't get that success, so they sort of hated their mum or dad, like, why did you make me go for Richmond, because we're the laughing stock. This is going to connect Melbourne families and Melbourne supporting families through generations, grandfathers, grandmothers, down to the next generation, right down to the newest generation that are coming through. And it is something that I look back on from 2017, and that is the thing that I'm most proud of, and probably brings the most joy to me, the fact that I was able to do that for people I'll never meet and never even know. So I really hope the Melbourne boys get that chance to do that. And the Doggies did it, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So it's something very special.
Yeah.
Good on him. I've never been a huge fan. I am now. He's been actually really good, I have to say, on filling in for Robbo. He's pretty slick.
But it's right. It does link the generations. Like I know with my dad to his grandkids, it can form a bit of bonding experience, and it makes those kids like my nephew not be ashamed to go to school and face his mates who might have premierships, and now he can tease all the Carlton and St Kilda supporters at school. Although we won't encourage that too much anyway. So the first portion of this show will break down each quarter. Then in the second portion, we'll go by player and talk about their performances and contributions during the grand final. We'll keep to their actual performance on the day, not delve into their performances for the year, as we'll cover that in our season review show. So without further ado, let's break down the first quarter. You couldn't have asked for a better start than that. The D's jumped out of the blocks. We brought the pressure with them, shell-shocking the Dogs. George, take us through it.
First quarter in a grand final. It was interesting because both sides play a not dissimilar style, but they've certainly got their own particular game styles that they do play. And for the first probably 10 minutes of the quarter, both teams were trying to establish that style. And despite all the narrative that we've talked about coming out of the media about the break and whether the Demons had too much time between games and they've only played one game in the last month and all those sort of things, it was certainly the Demons that came out and settled early. We saw them very rapidly doing exactly what they've done for the last 6 to 8 months during the whole season, and certainly particularly over the last month or so of the final series. If there was any question about physicality, it was sorted out very quickly. There were some really strong hits on Hannon and Bailey Smith. And for those two players who scored 7 goals between them in the preliminary final, they knew exactly that they weren't going to get the same unhindered runs through the middle that they were afforded by the Port Adelaide supposed defence. This told the Bulldogs very early on, you're in a serious game with a serious club now in a serious competition. The Dogs on their side were trying to establish their handball chaos type of game, where they go ring a rosy round, get it out to the man outside eventually. But unfortunately for them, the Demon pressure was forcing them to play wide and down the line. They couldn't get those that free running out in the open with multiple waves of players moving into the forward line. So even not talking about the scoring within the quarter, it was interesting that even halfway through that quarter, the Dogs had only managed 2 marks. They were really struggling to actually get the ball up the field. Traditionally, it was always, like I said, handball it out, get it out, kick it to someone in the open, move it into the forward line that way, but they were simply being denied. they eventually, after about half of the quarter, they reverted to the chip and kick type game just to simply get their hands on the balls. The Demons were doing a really serious job of denying them opportunities. This was all what it was all about, and we were going to see a lot more of the consequences of this first quarter as the game progressed. Bailey Williams in the back line, again, the pressure that was brought to bear caused him with two fatal errors, which led to Demon goals. One from Pickett, and the other one where he, again from Pickett, I think was involved in it, where he kicked it directly into Jackson, who gave it to Spargo for a goal. They were under extreme pressure that they just weren't used to, particularly in their back line. They're used to having the Caleb Daniels waltz around and do what they want. They're used to moving it wherever they want along the field, but they were being completely flummoxed. Even coming out of the back line, they were forced to go wide simply because when they looked down the line and looked across the whole field, there just weren't the options that were being available to them because the Demons' structures were so solid, even at this early stage. Down our own back line, Hibbert and Bowie were cleaning up anything that came down their way. Brown up forward was taking the forward rucking contest, which afforded Max Gawn rests while in the forward line. Poor old Steph Martin had to continue to ruck in the Demons forward line. And again, we'll see the consequences further down the track of Max not having to ruck all over the ground all the time. In the middle, lots of work going on in there, but really give some credit to Viney for a lot of the unseen clearances that he was giving to the team in the middle. I just can't emphasise the amount of not just the work, but just those little deft touches and handballs that he was causing the ball to bounce our way and to give us the maximum possible opportunities. So overall, the Demons had denied the Dogs their game style. We were causing errors all around the ground, and more importantly, we were keeping the ball out of the hands of their best players. At the end of the quarter, Bontempelli, for example, had only 4 disposals. Treloar, 4 disposals. Hunter with 2 disposals. These are the sort of players who, traditionally for the Dogs, once the ball gets in their hands, they cut you to pieces, but they just weren't getting it. And Melbourne had set up their style of play, and again, it was the stoppage and turnover, the hard contested stuff that eventually gets you the scores. By the end of the game, we'd scored 114 points from stoppage and turnovers. The poor old Dogs were exactly the opposite. They only scored 21. We'd already started to exert our dominance in this area in that first quarter. And again, we would only get to see the advantages of that towards the end of the game. Gawn was able to rest off the ground as well as up the field, but when Martin was off the field, because quite frankly he wasn't fit enough to be playing in the finals, it brought English out of their forward line, and all of a sudden they can't score. They've got one less tall forward up there. Not that English did very much in the end. So. Gawn, when he was used in the first quarter, when he wasn't in the rucking role, but on the field, he was used down defensively. So we were shutting them down all around the ground. We'd imposed what we needed to do, and as a result, we went into the quarter-time break with virtually a 4-goal lead or thereabouts.
I have some champion data stuff. The Melbourne scored 21 points from forward half intercepts. It's equal second best in an opening term this season. And also the Dogs conceded 22 points from turnovers. So that was, you mentioned the turnovers, but for the whole game, but that was the first quarter, 22 points. So there goes that's the pressure that we're applying. Big man?
And I mean, I said last week that, part of the frustration, speaking of analysis and the media discussion of this game, had 2 weeks to get this right. And round 11 was the one that needed to be drilled down on, not round 19. Some of the things in round 19 have come out, for instance, their ability to score front half goals, which happened in the second quarter, and that little bit about the sort of how they were going to man up on Lever and try to break that sort of, break that matchup. That's about it, though. Basically, round 11 was the one to look at in terms of what's going to happen in this game. So two things that really were, people talking about how well the Dogs start, and they've been the best starting team in the AFL. We've turned that around in the last 6 weeks. We've started terrific. That whole thing about who's going to be advantaged, as I said last week, we're going to be advantaged. We're the ones who are prepared for this. They're not going to be prepared for the noise that they're going to face having, been in front of 26,000 people, very quiet people, at Adelaide Oval in the previous final. So, all of the things pointed to us being advantaged. And so in that round 20, the last time the Dogs lost a first quarter by over 20 points was that game, was that round 11 game. And the two first quarters of those games were almost identical. What's his name? David King reckons it was an outlier that they in that round 11 game, that it was an anomaly that they conceded so many goals from front half turnovers. Well, it's exactly what happened in this game. That's what you were just saying, George. That's like 3 of the 4 goals that we scored were from 4 goals were from front half turnovers. So it was an almost mirror copy of that first quarter. We denied them the switch. They turned it over. Even the same players were turning it over. They couldn't move it out of there. We trapped them. So it was, for me, it's sort of easy to forget how important that quarter is, because you go to the end and the end of the third quarter. But really, I feel like that we won the game there. We needed to be in front. We put them under pressure, and they made a lot of errors. They were halfway through that quarter with 10 minutes to go. They were running at 38% disposal efficiency, and for the best kicking team in the AFL, basically, that's just huge. And as George said, it all came on the back of our incredible pressure. Just a couple of things that I thought Salem was brilliant. He was our best player in that first quarter, and he was so composed. And as I was saying last week, him and Daniels are often compared, but they play a different role to a degree, a slightly different role. One of them is Salem plays on a man often. He's a good one-on-one player, and he took a couple of really important one-on-one marks where he was strong, and his decision-making was excellent. He hit targets. I don't think he missed a target in that first quarter. Physically, he was really in the contest. The other one that was really important, I thought, was 2 other players, was Max. He took 3 contested marks in that quarter, and I thought he played a really good role. And, he was solid, but those marks, as George said, he was pushing forward and going back as well, were really important. And the other one is, I thought May's physicality was interesting. He put a big hit on Hannon, and also he seemed to be sort of, Norton, the way they played Norton on him right from the beginning. Why wasn't Norton running May around? I just couldn't understand it, because, he looked, I don't know what you guys thought, but May looked proppy.
Yeah, he did, but I think he looked proppy a bit later, not in that first quarter.
Yeah,
I think he bent down a bit later.
Hit. He got a big hit from the first goal. Was it, what's his name? Something Smith. What's his
Rock Smith.
Ward Smith, yeah, that hit on him, it laid him flat. Like that was a pretty big hit. And the other event I reckon that was important in that first quarter was Waitman hitting the goalpost. I'm amazed that he didn't come off the ground and get a concussion test.
Especially because he's just come back from concussion.
Well, I heard some talk that they deliberately didn't, which would seem to be an incredible, I can't believe that would be true. That would be an incredible.
Well, that then takes someone out for 20 minutes or whatever.
Well, yeah,
I know it's unethical.
If you look at the replay, he completely smashed his head into that pole and then hit the ground hard, which is often where they really hurt themselves with the whiplash. Is where they knock themselves out. His head didn't hit the ground, but he's whiplashed really hard, and he was really ineffectual after that.
Barely touched the ball.
He barely touched the ball, and I really wonder whether he knocked himself out. And I'm amazed they didn't take him off the ground to do a concussion test. I don't think they did. Do you know, George, if they?
I don't believe
No, nothing, because once you do the concussion test, you're off for 20 minutes in any case.
Yeah, well, I mean, that I was trying to, wasn't getting the words out. That would be an incredible breach of, of ethical medical standards, wouldn't it, for him if they had any concern? But normally they'd look at the footage and then they do it. That's the thing that triggers the assessment. And I was amazed. He clocked his head on it. So surely, to goodness, the logical thing would be to assess him. But I thought that was a big event because whether it was a coincidence or not, Hibberd was on him for pretty much the whole match. Did a great job on him. He didn't do anything, but I really feel like he's coming back from concussion. I would be very surprised if he wasn't concussed in that incident, or at the very least, he had his bell rung a fair bit.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The other thing, I thought our field kicking was brilliant in that first quarter, and part of it was how calm we were. I guess the big thing, though, was that, as we've talked about all season, is that we really should have been further ahead.
Yes, my old favourite.
Langdon missed one that he had more time on. Was it Frida? Brown missed one.
Brown missed a snap that he probably
Frida missed the first one.
Brown had time as well.
Yeah. We really. As you say, George, we jumped them and they didn't settle at all right through the whole quarter. We could have easily been 6 goals up, and then probably the game's over just about.
Yeah, like the first time we played them.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the second quarter. It was a dark mirror to the first quarter for Demon fans. The D's pressure dropped a little bit. I think the stats on that are the second quarter in total was 193 to 170 on the pressure gauge that you love, Big Man. We looked nervous and fumbly at times. The Dogs were started to really mark everything down the lines, those contested marks, and they were able to find avenues forward that were previously closed to them by the Demon web and by our pressure. Worst of all, our lead was lost and the D's went into the break in a deficit. Big Man, please dissect for us where it all went wrong, or I think that you think it wasn't all so bad.
Well, that quarter was bad. It was third quarter wasn't so bad. It is that, in simple terms, I said last week, there's the one stat that does still hold currency that's used a lot is contested ball. We're number one in the AFL contested ball. It's super important to how we play. It's a really useful KPI, and they were way up. And at during the call, I tried to find it, I couldn't find it, but I think they were plus 13 in that quarter. Do you know whether I think they were plus 13 contested possessions in that quarter. That 170 pressure rating is an average for the quarter. Yeah. I reckon it would have been 140 for the first 20 minutes because our last 10 minutes of that quarter was actually pretty strong. Yeah. But I think the simple explanation for that quarter was that that they brought their pressure level up to what we had in our first quarter, and their pressure was awesome. Elite. Their pressure was elite. And I'm surprised it was actually only 170 because I think I saw at one stage it was 200 plus. It's averaged out over for that 170. But so I think the sort of answer to what happened in that quarter was pretty simple, is that they got their level of intensity up to where we had it in the first quarter, and inexplicably ours dropped completely away. And that was when I was most worried, because that was, for me, the first time for ages where I've seen Melbourne's pressure drop off. Probably the last time it has to that extent was the Dogs, the round 19 game. So that was a bit of a concern because, we talked about it last week. Our game is completely dependent. To win, we need to have a foundation level of pressure, and it was way below where we needed to be. And evidence of that was about the 13-minute mark, or maybe halfway through the quarter, we'd only laid one tackle. I think they'd had 13 at that point. So we weren't tackling, we weren't pressuring. Dogs are, it's interesting because Dogs are number one. It's again, a lot of these things we flipped on them. As George said before, we turned the ball over in half, but they're actually number one in the AFL for front half turnover goals. We're number 4 over the season, but we're improved. We've been better than them by a fair bit in the last few weeks. But for me, that really came to the fore because, Treloar went into the centre. He hadn't been playing on ball in the first quarter. That was one of the moves that was made, and he was really effective. I thought he was their best player for the day. Front and centre goals, and those front half turnover goals. that's what they were looking to generate. We made some errors, but I think part of the answer was that also their entries were unpressured, or not to the extent that we would like. I thought Daniels was better in that quarter, but I really reckon that he was pretty ineffective. He got 26 possessions in the first half, but I really, when I watched the replay, really concentrated on what how effective those disposal was. He had 4 first half kick-outs, so one of which was a turnover. So you take them off his possessions. He was actually pretty poor, I thought. Not that effective. There was only one real, and that was in the second quarter, where he got an inside 50 kick and it went to English, the one that English and ultimately kicked into Petty. I think it was that one.
Are you talking about Caleb Daniels? Sorry, he was.
Yeah. Sorry, who did I say?
No, you were.
Daniel. So he wasn't that effective. So, I think that it was really so the short answer is that their pressure went up and ours dropped. Like it wasn't even that they out pressured us, because that happens. We dropped, and that's when I was at most worried, because that was really, I thought that was a bad sign, and it came out of the blue. Whether they were sort of maybe got ahead of themselves, I don't know. But definitely they brought the pressure and we didn't match it, which was really evident with the way it was going. I thought the other thing, tactically, it was always going to be the problem is Norton. Again, Norton wasn't the worry for us. It's the smalls and the mediums, and that's who kicked the goals, except Norton got the one goal. And I was amazed to hear as well, I think that was only his second goal, not from a set shot all season.
Yeah.
And that was interesting because he collected that ball, but I don't know, when you look at that replay again, May doesn't look right. When he did not look like he was going to be able to go with Norton. That actual play was interesting as well when it came out of the centre, was that it was sort of a bit of a sign of what Beveridge was trying to do with Gawn, which he didn't really even try to contest the ball to tap it. He just tried to nullify it, and it dropped. And that's what he was doing to Max all game. He was just really trying to physically, not clock him or anything, but just negate it. And it dropped straight down, and Bontempelli got that out. They got that midfield going. And so, I thought really they needed to keep more. I mean, it was a bit of a shock because they got the first 2 goals of the third quarter, and that meant they'd had 8 of 9 goals, which, there's been a few times that's happened to us this season where it seems like a real surprise that that's the number. But the big part of that is how often we miss, the shots that we've missed. It's not always an accurate reflection because we miss a lot of shots at goals. So, for me, that was the critical thing, is our dropping pressure. It was one really good bit of play that I thought that was really important, just showed the maturity and why Salem's so important. You'll remember we needed a goal. Salem slowed it down. And kicked up the line to Jackson, who also stopped, didn't handball it off, went back, and we ultimately got Brown marked and we got a goal. That was a really important goal, actually, because that was our only goal for the quarter. It would have made things tougher. The other thing from a tactical perspective is it was really interesting, I thought, because they went slower. They went more controlled in that quarter. And it's a catch-22 because they're actually a team that prefers it moving, the ball in motion. The problem is that that's what's happening in the first quarter, and they deliberately try to respond by slowing the game back, getting some control. But that's no way to score. That's not, that's not their game plan. So I thought that was really curious because they were, I think that the direction must have been to slow this game. Let's get it back. Let's get back some control. We can't let the ball out and loose because Melbourne are dominating. And maybe that was part of maybe that tactically worked to take the sort of our energy out of the game. So perhaps it was a smart tactical ploy from Beveridge. The other thing was Bontempelli was awesome, wasn't he? And he sort of, they do that a bit, but him pushing sort of down from the half forward to a marking contest, I thought that they did a good job in creating him, sort of giving him the chance to take contested marks. Watching him, he runs hard down to those contests. He's not already there for 2 of them. He's coming from outside the forward line into the forward line. And we sort of had a match-up problem with him, so our zone was a bit off. I thought they did a good job actually in that quarter, isolating our defenders and minimising our zone a bit. So But at the end of the day, it was the lack of pressure that we were applying was the key issue, I thought.
A couple of other stats that back up some of the things you said. The Dogs launched a goal from 46% of their inside 50s. That's their fourth highest percentage in a quarter this season. And the Caleb Daniel thing, he had 14 disposals in that quarter, 10 uncontested possessions, and 331 metres gained. That was probably his better quarter of the game, and he got a vote for the Norm Smith. I actually thought Treloar was better than him because he had 7 clangers for the match. He made so many errors, whether it was due to our pressure or not. So I think those clangers should be taken into account because they were quite costly, I thought. Yeah. And I didn't think just because you get a lot of possessions, and some of them were good off half-back, particularly in that second quarter. But, I disagreed with his...
and I mean, it was only once. I made a note of it when I was going through it. There was only once where he got a clean inside 50 and they didn't end up getting a score. Is you compare him to Salem. Salem had, I think, 4 or 5 inside 50 score involvements in the first quarter alone, I think. He takes a man. That's where Daniels doesn't really often defend man on man. So just the other couple of things. I thought the second Bont mark was pretty poor defending by Viney. He got screened out of that contest if you see it from behind. But, we talked about it last week. He's a star, isn't he, Bont? So I thought the second quarter was a combination of our dropping pressure. Tactically, they did slow it down, which worked. So hats off to Beveridge for that in terms of stopping our momentum. So it was quite clever from that perspective. But it was also partly built on individual skill, and Treloar stepped up, Bont stepped up. There are a couple of small things that I really liked, though, in the match that jumped out. Was a fantastic tackle by Viney on Bailey Smith, like a really crunched him, and then another ferocious tackle right directly afterwards by Sparrow, who looks to me like Jack's little brother but bigger.
When I talk about Sparrow later, I compare him to a mini Jack Viney, not in size, but just as like the younger prototype.
Yeah. And then again, the missing Nibbler kick missed with 5 minutes 30 to go in the quarter. Nibbler was unlucky to miss. It was actually a good shot. It was on the back of pressure. So it was really the first 20 minutes of that quarter, our pressure was way down, and it picked up in that last 10 minutes, and we got the game looking like we like to look at to get it. They still scored a goal after that. So, they really needed to put a bit more score on the board in that quarter.
George, anything you want to add before we move on?
No, that was a pretty good summary of it. It was definitely a drop-off in that pressure in that quarter, and the Dogs got to play the game that they want. But even at the end of that quarter, I was thinking they're 8 points up after throwing absolutely everything at us, and our defence has held up reasonably well despite in the first half of the quarter there was those couple of goals from Treloar in particular, who just wasn't being watched properly. Bontempelli, you're never going to stop for the whole game. He was just magnificent. But we really dropped off in the middle in particular. And I think that was the message that obviously came through at halftime about the contested possessions that need the contested ball that need to be picked up, and as we'll see, the boys certainly responded. But yeah, you're right as well. The Dogs needed to score more in that quarter, given the amount of opportunity that they had, but they didn't. And 8 points up at halftime isn't enough to completely change the game. And I think even as I'll talk about the third quarter shortly, but that they weren't controlling the game in the same way that they were in the first half of that quarter.
The third quarter continued on where the second left off, and the D's found themselves 19 points down. We were staring right down the barrel of a grand final defeat. But then the veil of the Norm Smith curse was lifted, and the D's produced a 3-minute goal frenzy, followed later by a minute of madness in the dying moments of the third quarter. Take it away, George.
The third quarter, I think, was first off started as a continuation of the end of the second quarter, where Melbourne were just grinding them down. And I don't think people really appreciate this as much, but it was exactly the same sort of grinding down that we did in the Geelong game and against Brisbane. They might have got a run on, but we're just re-establishing our way of playing the game. The Dogs got 2 goals in the first 9 minutes, but it took them 9 minutes to get those 2 goals. We had a couple of opportunities, I think, in that first period where again, we dropped off. They continued to do what they'd done in the second. Now, that's perfectly understandable. But there are a couple of things that they should have changed up, as we'll talk more about shortly. But they kept doing the same thing in the hope that that would continue. But, of course, you've got a coaching staff on the other side who are trying to counter exactly what you've been successful at. Treloar was moved into the middle in the second quarter, and they left him in there basically for the whole of the third quarter. But in the third quarter, he got a total of nine disposals, none of which I saw were in the middle. They were all around the ground because Treloar's an outside player. So the effectiveness of Treloar in the middle, they were almost playing with one man down. The Dogs were now trying to, because we had brought the pressure back, the Dogs were now trying to switch. And they were also going back to their old style, looking for the runners passing by to be able to create that overlap run. But like we had spoken about in the second quarter, we'd reimposed what we were doing in the first quarter. We were denying the opportunity. I think the other thing that happened was that in that second quarter and the first part of the third, they had actually thrown everything they possibly could at us, and they were exhausted. They had run out of steam. Bontempelli, for example, in the third quarter had five disposals total. As a result, around about the 8 or 9 minute mark into the quarter, he was rested for almost a full 5 minutes. He came off the ground, and at that stage, Jackson went into the ruck. Now, that caused not just the one thing, it caused a whole series of other things happening around the ground. Beveridge didn't change anything. He left Treloar in the middle, who was still getting no touches at the centre square bounces. Jackson went into the ruck, and Gawn went forward. Now, this was different from the first quarter where Gawn was playing a more defensive role, or Gawn was off the ground. Gawn went forward. What that meant was that the Dogs defenders were now suddenly a man short up in our forward line. They had Easton Wood, Keith and Cordy as their 3 talls, all of who had to mind Max, who's up there, and they also got Brown and T-Mac as well. So they've already got three players who they've committed to effectively between them. Guess who that leaves unattended? A guy named Bailey Fritsch. They simply don't have anyone else who can create the same sort of opportunities that he has. Their struggle. They saw what happened in the Geelong game when Gawn went forward. He wins the game for us effectively. So they're really concentrating on him that they didn't have to concentrate in the first half of the ground. Jackson in the middle all of a sudden starts to give us the opportunities because he can jump over the top of English and certainly can jump over the top of Martin. That simply wasn't happening before. As Binman has said, all they were trying to do with Gawn was jump into him to deny him, to bring the ball to the ground so that their mids could get the opportunity. But their mids now had Treloar sitting in the middle doing very, very little. He's not an inside runner, he's an outside runner. So they were dependent on Liberatore and particularly to get out. Libba completely stopped in that quarter as well. He just simply stopped getting the ball. I think they just run out of steam. So Bont went missing. Treloar was doing nothing, and they've got no match for Fritsch up everything. On the wing, Brayshaw went absolutely berserk in this quarter. He had 9 disposals in the quarter alone after 12 in the first half. As I said, Liberatore dropped down to 5 disposals for this quarter. Bontempelli 5. McRae only had 4. Hunter only had 4 and Daniel only had 3. These are the people that they want the ball in the hands of, and none of them could get their hands on it, or they were completely shot and couldn't get their hands on it. Viney in the middle also stepped up dramatically, particularly with those little deft touches. Everybody notices when Oliver comes out of the middle, or Petrarca comes out of the middle. everyone misses the fact that Viney's just towed the ball slightly beyond all the opposition mids as well, just to give the opportunities to the Olivers and Petrarcas to be able to do something with it. Likewise, the Dogs went back to their down-the-line sort of way of playing and the old chip and kick in the hope that something would happen. It didn't happen for them. So the other thing that happened from that midway point is the Demons kicked 7-2 in their quarter. We talked about it last week in the preview, the importance of accuracy. The Dogs in the second quarter had their opportunities and didn't take them. They needed to lead by a considerable amount, but we were kicking accurately when we were getting into the forward line. Particularly loved when we got to the end of the quarter, Petrarca's absolutely ridiculous kick in the pocket. But if you have a look at the replay, and it's on the Demonland site, have a look at what Cosby does to his opponent just as Petrarca gets hold of the ball. He completely blocks him beautifully to allow Petrarca to dribble it through. So at the end of the quarter, we'd kicked 7 goals to 2 goals, including that last 3 ridiculous 3 goals in 32 seconds, people have told us. But importantly, I think the Dogs had thrown everything that they possibly had at us. Their fitness is showing. Our fitness, more importantly, was showing, and the importance of Darren Burgess and his team. That's been a message all through this final series in particular. When you look at the time on ground for the opposition players, people like Bontempelli only played 86%, whereas Petrarca played 94% of the game. Treloar, despite all his accolades in the second and third early part of the third quarter, was only on the ground for 74% of the game. McRae, their other damaging midfielder, played 78% of the game. They'd run out of steam. It was all over. And unfortunately for Beveridge, he just left them in there doing exactly what they'd done in the second quarter and didn't make the changes. But I think his hands were actually tied, and we might talk about their failings a bit later on, but his hands were actually tied by the people that he had chosen to represent them in the grand final. But at the end of the third quarter, the match was as good as over. They were completely shot, particularly in that last 30 seconds or minute of the game. Their heads were down, they were gone, it was all over. The game and the grand final was ours, and the premiership for ours for the taking.
So the whole narrative going into the game was that they would be better off because they had the momentum. They had played all those games, despite them having gone from all over the country. They were saying that Melbourne not playing the game, only playing 2 games in a month, 3 games in 30 days or whatever, was going to be to our detriment, but it seems like it was the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's just the professionalism that Burgess and the team have put into them. They didn't suffer anything from the lack of games, and I think you mentioned it at the start. Even that captain's run, they looked on top of they were running on top of the ground easily, but the Dogs looked very, very different, and they can claim that they had a difficult run. Well, of course they had a difficult run in the final, had to play another game, but they got the same rest coming into this game as we had. But
that's what happens when you lose the last 3 games and miss out on the top 4.
Yeah, and we didn't.
We've had to do that many times, so.
Fantastic analysis, George, and brilliant. And I'm pleased in the sense that, as I said, I'll be curious as to your analysis on that because, I was a bit frustrated in that call and even subsequently, which is sort of part of the reason why I wanted to talk later about the sort of experts. I thought Daisy Pearce was excellent. She was really good. The commentary was really good.
When she could get a word in. yeah,
although fair play to her. I mean, not fair. They gave her more airtime than they have been, which was brilliant. And she's clever. She knows what she's talking about. As George has pointed out, she's a coach in the, I could see her coaching the AFL, our AFLW sooner rather than later. But she's tactically, she really knows her stuff. But I had I disagreed with what she was saying about, the sense that we were on the back foot, that we needed to, get a goal. I mean, at 19 points down, of course, I was nervous that we were 3 goals down, but, you're 100% spot on, George, is that, what we did was we went back to our game plan, and it was so obvious. As you say, we've been doing it all season. We brought up our tackling. We got our contested ball back to where it should be. We got our pressure rating back to what demon football looks like, and we got the game looking like we like to, into the shape we like it to look like. You hear Goody talking about it all the time, is the way we want to play. It looks like this. That's what it looks like. It was back to contest, hard contest. We stopped them transitioning. We pushed up on them to make it hard for them to flip it around. We wouldn't allow them the outlet handball. We wouldn't allow them the easy cross, which was the biggest feature of the second quarter. Is no team has crossed as often against us for weeks than they did in that quarter, which is evidence of us not pressing up and pushing up on them. We stopped allowing unpressured kicks by Daniels. He basically took him out of the ground. I think Swallow went to him. And, as you said, you picked up exactly my point was going to be about McRae. I think the one that they really put time into, McRae, he only had 25 possessions for the game and none in that quarter, basically, for a fellow who averages mid-30s probably.
Yep, absolutely.
That was a huge factor, and no one's talked about it. And I don't really know how they went about. I know that they kept him on the outside, but that was a massive tactical win for us, and it seems like no one's talking about it. So
they certainly talk about it when he's getting 37, 40 possessions, but when we shut him down, no talk about it.
Well, I was really surprised in the wash-up. I haven't heard anyone in the footy media talk about how significant it was that he averages 10 less possessions. He's so damaging. And
I think one of the things that they didn't do was actually put him in there. When I was looking at the, he only came in for 2 centre bounces in that third quarter. They just weren't using him. Like I said, they left Treloar in there, and they should have had McRae in there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it was. I thought that was a remarkable part of the game, is his lack of influence, and whether he was down or it's more likely we put time into him. And it's really hard to tell, even watching multiple replays, how they went about it. But one assumes that that's what they've done, and it was a big factor. So they didn't worry about Daniel so much. They gave Bailey Smith, like I was saying last week, no peace whatsoever, no space to run into. They looked to knock him down at every time. And exactly right, George, in terms of the game suddenly. I wonder whether Daisy Pearce and the other commentators are caught up in the history of this team of what could happen if we lose, because that's where everyone's minds went to, in the sort of not everyone, but the fans and, all of us and the commentators. And so even someone as balanced and spot on as Daisy normally is, her energy was, we're on the back foot. We really need the next goal. This is, we're 1 goal away from the rubber band being stretched so far that, we're not going to win, which it just, to me, doesn't make sense. How often in following footy have you heard 3 goals is nothing in the modern game? Well, 6 goals is nothing in the game for us. We've been flogging teams. Right from the round 19, as I said, we're averaging over 100 points. Now it's 106 points we're averaging in the 7 wins we've had since then. The very next week after the Dogs game, we flogged the Suns. We've flogged Geelong. How many points in the second half did you say that we've scored, Andy?
It was like 250 to 170.
That's what I mean. Why are people looking at these in isolation? We were so much fitter. They were running on gas. You could tell. It's such a good point you make, George, about the time on ground. It wasn't tactical. Bont was off because he was gassed. They was a mess. Halfway through that quarter, again, it's sort of, the feeling was they were 3 goals up. They kicked 8 of 9. So it felt like on the scoreboard, it felt like they were on top. But looking at it, we were getting the game back how we like it. That's how good he, likes to do it. So halfway through that quarter, the previous 21 inside 50s we'd kicked 1-7. The previous 21 inside 50s they'd kicked 7-3. You make us kick 6-2, suddenly we're in front at that point. So, they wouldn't have been overly fussed. They would have been worried at halftime because our pressure rating was way off, 100%. But all of that, that even when it went to 19 goals, that was at the 8. It took ages to get that second goal. We missed a goal in the interim. The sense was, I think Daisy said something like that. We need to get a goal to settle the nerves. In fact, I reckon the opposite's true. They needed to kick 3-4 more goals. And the problem was exactly as you say, George. The issue for them was that they weren't attacking. They needed to do what Adelaide did to us and keep attacking. And, in the second quarter, they were using the corridor. They stopped using the corridor completely in that third quarter. And they played into our hands. I totally agree with you, George. They played into our hands. They needed to, their only chance of winning that game was to go hell for leather and try to get a 5-goal lead. Because once they could only stretch it out to 19 points. But that wasn't what the commentators were saying. And that wasn't, I guess, what lots of people were. That's more about the fear of losing. I think that the sort of afterwards, when she was asked, Daisy, I'm not picking on Daisy, but she was asked why the turnaround. Daisy said that we rediscovered our dare. That's what the difference was. That's not it at all. George, you're 100% right. It's that we work hard to get the game back on our terms. And when they're exhausted, what we do is we take full advantage when we get the momentum. We've been doing it all season. We're kicking goals in bursts where we get on top and we get the energy going. We kick 3-4 goals. We did it in round 23, as you said. We did it against Brisbane. We did it in the prelim. I mean, what more evidence do people want that this is the way we play? So for me, the issue was for them is that they needed to attack more and played into our hands by not. And then, you get the last, of course, 3-4 minutes of the quarter and the game's over at that point. Just the other thing that was really important was, of course, Jackson going into the taking the centre bounces, and people were talking about even Goody. He's still after the game. He's not patting himself on the back. You would have heard him say that Maxie told him to leave him in there. Come on. I mean, Goody planned this. As I said, in the North Melbourne game down in Tasmania, he was the reason that we got back into that game in that third quarter. That's exactly what they did. They moved him out of the ruck. And it meant that even if he couldn't, a lot of those clearances, Jackson didn't actually win the tap. What the benefit was is suddenly you've got an extra midfielder. So we've actually got an extra at the centre clearance stoppages because you've got him and who's he against? Martin or English, who are immobile basically. So it was super clever by Goodwin. And again, he's not getting any credit for it. It's a bit like, wasn't Jackson good? I'm sure that was part of the planning. What do you do? So much emphasis on what to do with Max. Well, they took Max out of the play and brought Jackson in, and it was a match-winning move, I reckon. So, yeah, I just saw that quarter much differently to seemingly even most of the commentators who were talking about it. So, and there's a clip that I watched afterwards, actually, about 4 a.m, Andy. So I was up till 4. I was actually up to 5:30, I think, watching it. And you've got it of Gus talking to Gary Lyon in the room. It's a very chuffed Gary Lyon.
You want me to play that now?
Yeah, yep.
I think it's this button. One sec.
He's got the Brayshaw name covered here. He's a premiership player. You got your uncle covered. You got your old man covered. You got everyone covered.
Well, geez, look, you can look at it like that. Despite how much of an idiot my uncle is and the rest of it.
Very good point.
Despite all that, it's really special to have him here. Yourself, all the people who are here tonight to be able to share in this moment. It's brilliant. Obviously, I'm feeling a lot for the people at home because there's all our supporters who are watching now, having not been able to come, but boy, oh boy, I just hope that everyone at home enjoyed the ride because I'll be honest, 19 points down in the, second quarter, people would have potentially counted us out, but I'm so proud of our group to be able to stick fat and come back.
Was there panic at all? Did you have the belief and faith?
No panic. So that's what I've got immense confidence. We all have immense confidence in each other in terms of playing our role, and we knew that our defence was off a little bit. They were going really hard forward, and their midfielders, Treloar kicked 2, Bontempelli kicked 2 in that second quarter. And let's talk about the Bulldogs. Immense respect for them as a team. So we knew they were going to throw a punch, but we came in at half time and we just bring it back to our defence and our contest. That's what we base our game on. And we came out in that third quarter. The first 10 minutes was exactly the way we wanted it in terms of just grinding it out. It was no one scored, but we got the game back into a contest. And then, far out, it's just so good, Gary. I can't, it was, and, there's so many words you could say. I'm so happy for, I see the amount of work we've all put in. I see the sacrifices everyone makes. I see the past players. I see our supporters who have struggled for 57 years. And it's hard to put it all into words, but I feel fulfilled because 57 years ago was the last time I won a flag, and here we are today. And it's just so special for our club, mate, our club.
You're doing a bloody good job of putting it into words, let me tell you.
That's well played by Gary Lyon there. It made me laugh. I think that Gus and I suffer from the same disease. You've got MFCSS, Andy. I've got verbosity. So.
Can't blame the guys. Just won a premiership.
Yeah. I haven't got that excuse. But see those key words that he said. He never doubted it. Of course, they didn't doubt it. Why? And that's the thing is they've earned our trust as a footy team. I never doubted it either. Like, I was nervous, just as he was. But exactly as George said, what did they do? They brought it back to how they like the game to look. Contest to contest. They grinded it, and they physically made it hard for the opposition. And it's been our game plan all season. Take them outside their comfort zone, and when we've got them there, make sure we take full advantage, and we've become lethal in our ability to do so. We're by far the best offensive team. That's what I was saying last week. And no one's talking about that. They're talking about it like, oh, wow, this is an unusual event. This is not an unusual event. This is culmination of what Goody's been trying to do. And I flagged a few weeks ago that I suspect Goody and the midfield team have got a whole lot of tricks that they're waiting to release in terms of their setups and structures. And I think we saw them in that end of that third quarter. We saw some of them too in the Geelong prelim game and the round 23 of getting out the front of the contest. We've been talking a lot about it this season, George and I and you, in terms of we get out the front of contests now. We don't get our clearances behind the contest. We don't need to win clearances because when we do win them, they're out the front of the contest. And that was the perfect illustration of it at the end of the third quarter. And tactically, that's why it's, the question is, people are already saying, why didn't Beveridge put someone in front of that contest? Why didn't they have the halfback flankers running in hard to cover that hole? Well, the answer is they haven't been training that all season because no one's been doing that. No one's been setting up like that. No one's been, that's a really rare goal. They've already said, it's an outlier because we engineered that and we did it to lethal effect. He didn't have time to set someone else up on the other thing. And the other point that, George, you make is a really good one is I thought Liberatore had an average game. He sort of played the faux tough guy all game. He was the one roughing us up.
And with Petty, Rambo giving it to Petty, even though Petty then smothered.
That's when he needed to go to work. He shouldn't have. Some of those balls, they weren't even tap outs. Jackson didn't win the tap out. We just got the ground ball, and that's supposed to be what Liberatore's go-to is. So, I thought that was brilliant by Goody. He hasn't been credited for it. And I reckon a lot of people have read that third quarter wrong.
Let's go under the radar. I don't mind if people underestimate us going into next year as well. Some other stats from the third quarter. You spoke about Track with his 10 disposals, 250 metres gains, 5 score involvements. The D's clearances, we won by 8. It's our equal best differential in a term for 2021. And we scored 31 points from stoppages, our second most in a quarter this year. So
exactly,
really was,
and that's the Melbourne game. That's exactly, and that's what George is saying, is getting it back, grinding it, getting it back how we like it. That's the Melbourne game. And so they would have been really happy. It's like Gus was saying, they worked hard to do it. They needed to do something different. They played into our hands. Their chance to win that game was to really attack through the centre. There was only one goal one play all day where it looked like the 2016 Dogs where they're running ahead of the ball when Johannesson got an overlap run.
Yep.
The rest of the game, they looked static, and so we took that strength away from them. That's the problem, and they couldn't take our strengths away from us except in that second quarter, and I argue that's in large part because our pressure wasn't sort of nearly at the standard it needs to be. The other thing too, Gus was awesome in that quarter, wasn't he?
He was fantastic.
Unbelievable. And that mark he took, running back with the flight and diving, and then to go back and kick it, like that was such a clutch goal. I reckon that was one of the most important moments of the whole grand final. And, and he was so pumped afterwards. So that was awesome. His best game ever, I reckon, for the club.
His champion data rating for that quarter was 79 and Petrarca's was 57. So I'm not sure what metrics are worked out, but and Oliver's was 50. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was just awesome.
And we'll talk more when we go individual things, because I thought it was one of the best games he ever played for the Melbourne Football Club, but we'll talk more about that later. Let's talk about the final quarter. It was party time for the Demons. In less than a minute, Ben Brown had taken a mark from a beautiful kick from Sparrow, and I just love this kid. We'll talk about him later. Ben Brown kicks his third. 30 seconds later, Spargo is hitting up Fritsch with a perfect kick onto a lead for Fritsch's fifth. And I guess everyone besides me probably thought game over. I know I was getting text messages from people claiming victory for me. I wasn't willing to take it yet. 8-minute mark, Langdon, he chip kicks it to Nibbler, and Nibbler nails it from inside 50. That's when I start to think, shit, we might win this. And remember, I'm the nervous wreck during the home and away. If we're even 10 goals up, and I've got the memories of losing to Essendon from 48 points up, so I'm never comfortable. But, I just witnessed, and because I had also in the end of the third quarter, I had witnessed 3 goals in 31 seconds. So, I mean, I've never seen that, but have you ever seen 3 goals in a minute or 30 seconds, whatever it was? Never seen that before.
Geelong must have been pretty close in the round 23 game. Yeah,
it was like in a 4-minute period, I think they'd score for. But you don't see it that often. But now, talk about MFCSS, I'm going to be thinking about that. And hopefully it's us doling it out to other teams. But I'm always going to have it in the back of my mind. Oh, it can be done. So thanks, Dees. Thanks for that. Put my therapy back years. 11-minute mark, Ed Langdon is just doing what Ed Langdon does best. He's got the ball in the back line. He's got a possession. He's gut run down the entire wing from that possession in the back pocket to taking a mark in the forward pocket. That was just amazing. Incredible. The guy, he just runs and runs and runs. He does it all days. I don't know, but George, do you know his time on ground? It was probably up in the 90,
give us a
high
second.
90 percentile. While you're looking that up, he kicked a beautiful snap, kick truly from that, and then Andy is really starting to believe we've got this.
96%, Andy.
Well, there you go. The guys.
Speaking of Langdon, I thought of you actually because when I watched the replay, I noticed that he came off with 4 minutes, 58 seconds to go. And I put a note here saying, Langdon goes off. I thought he stays on for the whole time, but, that was – I thought he might not come back on, but he actually came back on. And that goal that you're talking about, he was spent, wasn't he? At the end of that, he had to lie down just to...
He also took the full 30 seconds. I think the umpire gave him a few extra ones as well, just so he could suck it in. That was absolutely incredible. Absolutely. And that's him. That's him. That's his game. He does it all day.
It's incredible, isn't it? Out of that sequence there, he probably got 1 handball and 1 kick.
Yeah,
and yet something like that completely changes the way a game can be played, and the effect on the whole team to see something like that.
It was another remarkable thing at the 18-minute mark. Clary smothers the Daniel kick, another one of Daniel's clangers, and then Track just rips it. And rather than blaze away, which at that point of the game he has every right to do, considering the game he played, he lowers his eyes and he kicks that perfect layup to T-Mac, who just runs into it for T-Mac's first goal. And that's the point I knew that we'd be premiers. 55 points up, 8 minutes to go. Mathematically possible, but my eyes were telling me something different by what I was seeing. But then Treloar, he kicks his goals, and with 6.5 minutes left, and I'm where it broke our 12-goal streak, and nervous Andy starts recalculating in his head, and then perhaps my favourite goal of the night happens. Salem sneaks forward and he picks up a loose ball, and he's so composed in the traffic, and he turns around, he snaps one through, and guys, we're home. And the last quarter, was all icing on the cake for normal D's fans, but for this nervous wreck, it had to wait to those last 3 goals, and Jackson's goal on his home turf, Fritchie's 6th, and Tom McDonald's after the siren were all just cherries on the top. And then I could finally enjoy it and breathe that sigh of relief. And boys, we're the premiers. We're the premiers. I can't believe it. This is just, and as I said in the top of the show, just watching the boys, celebrating after the siren. It was quite comical. While Tom McDonald's having a shot for goal, there's a pile up of players. I don't know how he had the composure to kick it. I guess the pressure's totally off, but he's got a pile of players right next to him, all jumped on each other. He's kicked a goal. I just loved watching that whole aftermath, the ceremony, the players getting their awards. None of them sort of overdid it, with the celebrations. They weren't gooses where they had every right to be. So I was just proud of everything. I was extremely disappointed that Goodwin didn't get to say his speech, that Basil Zemplis, he absolutely stuffed it up. I didn't even allow Embley to say who the Norm Smith medalist was. To see Gary Lyon up there, who was a childhood hero of mine, give them the cup. Best day of my life. I could go on and on, and it's something that I'll never forget, as I said, for as long as I live and breathe. Greatest day, it's obviously beside wedding, family, kids. It's up there on the top shelf with all of that. So if I've got some stats, we won contested possessions by 15, inside 50s by 10. That's no surprise. We launched 36 of our 57 points. So our caller Noah was right. I think it was Noah, directly from a turnover. So 36 directly from turnovers. So we were still applying the pressure, or maybe they'd put the cue in the rack. Christian Petrarca, 11 disposals, 6 contested possessions, and 7 score involvements in that last quarter. Is remarkable. Anything you want to add to that last quarter?
I think you've summed it up pretty well. It's it was party time, wasn't it? Yeah. After particularly, I think they even said it it was Nibbler's goal, wasn't it? Yeah. On the call, party time. Well, I mean, the key one, really, the key moment for me in some respects was getting that first goal early. Yeah. And that was 2 bits of play like that. It's sort of how disciplined this team is. It was on show all night, right through to the end of the game. It was on show. For instance, Maxi not going a barrel when the crowd are telling him to go for a barrel 60 metres out, doing the team thing, and how angry Track looked that he stuffed that up. But in that goal was a beautiful bit of play. 2 things. Nibbler, I'm pretty sure this is the goal that I'm thinking, is Nibbler was running forward, and he had to sort of engineer a way to get it to Captain Jack, and he sort of bounced it out, like he kicked it, sort of a banana kick with a running ball to Sparrow. And Sparrow's kick, rather than going for goal, the team thing is to put it to at the advantage of Brown. And
it was perfect for a perfect sit for Brown with his long arms.
Totally. I mean, it's arguably not a mark, to be honest. So
you know what? You pay it. What's his name? Yeah. English got one for holding it for less. He had probably a free then, but it's paid.
But in that, for me, that encapsulated Melbourne footy this year.
And there was front-on contact. Yep.
We got the ball moving. It was flowing. Nibbler, who I thought had an awesome game, he got it out in front of Sparrow, Sparrow was on Daniels. Daniel was nowhere in the screen. Like, he ran off. He only had 3 possessions in the third quarter, Daniels, and I reckon Sparrow made him look silly. He became a liability because Sparrow just ran off him. And then Sparrow's sort of ability to do the same thing and get it kick the right ball, weight it properly. He's got a really excellent, he could easily he could have taken the shot, no problems, given the context of the game. It was a smart play, beautiful kick, team play, young fella, who's in his first full season. He's, and he's playing in a grand final, makes the right choice. I thought it was brilliant. And then it was game over. Once we got that first goal, you knew exactly as George said, they'd fired their shot. They were running on fumes at that point, Dogs, and nothing to do with the travel. It's just because they're not as fit as us, and our game style is extremely taxing for the opposition as much as for us. It's just that we can cope with it. So I thought that was a brilliant bit of play and summed us up. And for me, that was it. That was game over.
George, anything you want to add before we go into the individuals?
No, I think we can move to the individuals. It was just party time at that stage. So, we can move on to the individuals.
Oh, George, you did want to discuss before that how we exposed the Dogs' weaknesses. Do you want to get into that? Or have you...
Yeah, I think, for the Dogs, they've been a great team, but they've been running the same game plan basically now for 5 years. What I think that's exposed, though, and we did it so beautifully in this game, was their weaknesses, which I think they're going to struggle over the next 12 months, 2 years to actually fix. Firstly, their ruck weaknesses. Martin was a fill-in and only played basically in this final series because English isn't up to it to be able to endure the time that's required in the ruck. He's just not physically strong enough at the moment. So I think this game also exposed and really seriously exposed their utter dependence on Bontempelli. He leaves the ground for 5 minutes and we kick 4 goals. They depended on him getting them back in the game in that second quarter. If Bontempelli goes down, as I think he did a couple of years ago with an injury, they just go nowhere. Their backline, they've got serious weaknesses as well. They don't have enough team defence. They don't have enough really serious defenders. They got away with it against Port because Port only had Dixon and McKenzie. In this game, when we dropped Gawn down into the forward line, they didn't have the people to go with us. They didn't have with what we were offering. So, I think they've got problems down the back. They brought in Alex Keith to try and shore them up, but in this game, we saw time and time again, particularly with Fritsch, that Easton Wood was trying to cover that last 20 metres to pick up Fritsch, who was free on the outside, because they couldn't look after all three of those big talls at the same time, and somebody had to cover off for Fritsch, and it certainly wasn't going to be Duray or Bailey Williams. Williams was just appalling in this game. The other thing I think that this exposed seriously for them was their forward line. In the absence of Bruce, Norton only got 1 goal, and the other goal that they got from one of their forwards was Johannesson. 2 for the game from their forwards. That's their style of play. They depend on their mids and their runners coming up the field to score games. They're not going to get away with this now. People will very quickly learn, shut down those mids and the way they move up the field, and they've got no other options up forward. So, they've got some serious problems all around the ground, and I don't think they'll be back in the finals in the same way seriously for years to come.
Oof, that's a big call.
It'll come back to bite me, don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I mean, it's interesting because in the last part of the season they actually changed the way they played quite a bit, because they kicked more, and in the grand final of the biggest game, the way they were playing isn't the way that they were playing in the first half in the first third of the season, when they were so damaging offensively. They were deliberately trying to slow the game down, because that was that sort of catch-22 that I've talked about against the Ds. You play fast, it advantages us. You play slow, you don't score enough to beat us. And that's what I said last week. You've got to score more than 70, keep us to under 70 points, because we're going to keep everyone under 70 points. And we did. You wouldn't have thought that halfway, at half time, but that's the same thing. You wouldn't have thought that halfway at half time of the Brisbane game, or against the Geelong game in the round 23, or the prelim, that they would struggle, or perhaps the prelim. Again, 66 points. They're not. The teams have to keep us under 70. It's a bad model, and their opportunity in the first third of the season, you give them a shot at doing so, of scoring 100 points themselves. They needed to score 100 points to beat us, not 70. I mean, I was talking about 70 is the bet to keep us under 70 and score more. But realistically, at the form we're in at the moment, no one's keeping us to 70 points. Of all the teams in the AFL who could seriously do that, it's them, but only at their attacking best. And they've changed that style. It's a funny way that they've gone about coming into a grand final. And even in that second quarter, they were much more deliberate. They weren't flipping it around as much as they were early in the season, because that model's got a tactical flaw. I mean, so I agree with what you're saying, George, around their weaknesses. I think they've got the list, and he's a good coach. I'm sure that they'll be able to rejig their game plan. I'm much more confident of their ability to do it than Geelong, for instance, because they've got to find a way to get their defensive. Basically, everyone's going to try and copy our defensive zone, aren't they? But that takes years to put into place. That's the problem. And so I think that was their problem coming to this game, is tactically they needed to find a new way of doing something to beat us. And so that's advantage us. If they're changing their way of playing because their way of playing isn't going to beat our system, then there's you're going to lose more often than you win in that circumstance. So I agree in terms of their weaknesses fully.
All right, let's move on to some individual performances. Now we're going to take a look at the performances of our players on the day. As mentioned earlier, we'll contain it to just the performances on the day, as we'll do a full season review podcast soon that will cover their body of work throughout the year. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. We'll also be doing wrap-up shows of the trade period, not as important these days, maybe not, and then the draft, and I'll try and get our draft guru, Jason Taylor, on again to discuss the players that we pick. There's a lot to look forward to in the off-season, but first, let's talk about this exceptional team. George, you're going to start us off with Michael Hibberd, number 14.
Michael Hibberd, yeah. Didn't do much in terms of touches and disposals, but backmen don't have to, and he's playing that fourth role, shutting down those opportunities that the Bulldogs so dramatically depend on. In the first quarter, particularly, he denied opportunities to Johannesson and Waitman as the goalkeeper, last line of defence type player. He only had those 7 touches, but 4 of them were intercepts. He's exactly the sort of player that we need, although we've got a couple of other options in this role, typical role of just playing your job, doing your job as a role player, let the others do their bit. He did exactly what we needed him to do, and no criticism whatsoever from that perspective.
I like his game, very, always get physical with the man and gives his body into it. I've got Stephen May next. It would not come as a shock to anybody that at times May's hammy looked a bit shaky. And we mentioned it before. In the second quarter, I noticed he pulled up after a contest. He looked a little bit limpy. We come to find out after the fact that he did in fact start the game with a torn hammy, but they treated the symptoms and not really telling him the full extent of the injury. I think he didn't want to know about it either, but he was training well and he got through. So, having said that, all that, he played Norton like a glove. He barely gave him an inch except for that one time when Norton got off and had that snap. But you can't discount what he does on the field, the marshalling of the troops that both he and Lever do on the ground, calling players back, setting them up. That leadership is absolutely invaluable, and I'm happy for him to rest it up and miss the Marsh series and hope that he's cherry ripe for round 1 for the unfurling of the flag at the G, because he's just a super player. If either of you guys want to add anything to anything anyone says, jump in, otherwise I'll move it along.
Yeah, just quickly on May, I thought he clearly looked hampered, didn't he? But I was amazed Norton didn't run him around more, or they didn't try and take advantage of his lack of mobility.
Because they would have known, not that he had the tear, but they knew he was, at least tested out.
Yeah. So yeah, that was. But I thought he's a talisman. He's fantastic, and he was important in the first quarter. He was important because he put a couple of big hits in, and he took marks as well. He got denied an unbelievable mark. I thought the umpires did a good job actually, but there were a couple of ones that jumped out, including the mark that he wasn't paid at the end of the second quarter. We were lucky not to concede a goal on, but great to have him out there as well. So yeah. And I've got his brother in arms down there, Lever.
Yeah, go for it.
I thought Lever had for him a pretty standard game. There's a question in the chat room about whether they put too much work into Max, and I think it's sort of by lazy, and I sort of think I agree, and that's my answer to that is yes. And I was saying before, I think that there was way too much emphasis on Max. The reason I raise that is I think there was way too much emphasis on Lever because they're worrying about him as if he's going to be the reason we're scoring 100 plus points. So I think there was another tactical or advantage us sort of scenario. He had, what do you have? He had 17 disposals, 11. His turnovers, I'm not sure on his turnovers. I had it up here. I can't see it now. I think they only had 8 turnovers for the match. Down back, is that right? 8 turnover marks. He only had a couple, so really low for him. But I think they were completely fine with the setup down there. So they didn't, the whole thing about who he's going to play on. He played on English a bit. I think he played on Waitman at one stage, but I think that's probably a handoff thing. I thought he was serviceable without being, at his brilliant best, but it was just. We've talked about this through the season, is you don't need everyone to be a star on the day, and that's the advantage of the system. Their forwards just didn't extend us, and as is the case, the problem for us is when the ball hits the ground down there, is not in the air. So it was a solid match for him, and he, to be honest, he wasn't really needed. Nor was May. They weren't going to be difference makers because, as George says, everyone was talking about their forward line early in the season. It's, it hasn't panned out that way for them. And Norton, needs run and, be able to run and jump. He wasn't given the opportunity to do so. I thought that Lever was, similar, like you're saying with May. He's such a good leader down the back in terms of his direction, and he just has this air of confidence. So, I thought they were a little bit shaky in that second quarter, but again, that's the whole thing. If you don't put enough pressure on that inside kick, it makes it very hard for the defenders. But yeah, a solid game.
George, we've got next Bowie, Jake Bowie, the seven gamer, never lost a game, and playing. He's won a premiership. Yeah. And I just saw on the Demons Twitter, it was a year ago today that he was drafted. So he has a premiership less than a year.
Yeah, never lost a game in his 7-game career so far. So what we've got to hope for is that he can keep up that record to make it to 32 games, which will result in a second premiership. 17 disposals at 88% disposal efficiency. He looks like he's played 200 games, this kid. He is just fantastic. He fits in beautifully into this half back line. 3 intercepts and actually had 5 score involvements as well. He moves the ball out of the back line. He is a perfect foil or addition to Salem on the other side. We just can't. It's just been incredible, his story alone. But also, I think from a backman's point of view, and this is really critical, is you shouldn't be overlooking who he was playing on and how much they denied these players their opportunities. Hannon, Waitman, Johannesson and Treloar for a short time were all down in that area. And quite frankly, apart from Treloar, when he went into the middle, the rest of them were almost non-existent in the game. But Bowie did his job. Once again, another role player down there and fits in beautifully. He's not going anywhere for a long time.
He was terrific, wasn't he? And what I like, George, about the way he plays is that unlike Daniels, there's so much talk about Daniels, but he's he doesn't man up on a player, whether that's his model or not. Whereas both Salem and Bowie, they take a man and he defends one-on-one. And I love the way he hates giving up one-on-one contests. Doesn't lose many of them, despite he's got a height disadvantage. So his starting point as a defender is as a defender should be. He starts on a man, then he runs off him. Whereas if you look at the way Daniel sets up, he's all by himself. And sometimes I'll let him, the opposition coaches will let that occur, which we do sometimes, because if you're standing and getting the ball in a defensive side of a stoppage, well, doesn't matter how good a kick you are, is that you can have limited impact. And so, he'll get compared to Daniels a bit because he's short and he's a brilliant kick. But I really, for a fella who, by all accounts, has had to be taught how to defend because he's been a midfielder forward for all his junior elite career. He seems to be a great one-on-one defender now and have really good defensive instincts. So I love that about him, the way he wins his contest first against the man he's on, and then he looks to exploit that. And as you say, you've got Salem and him now who are getting the ball inside 50. That's a pretty wicked double and a really clever selection by Goody, I thought, to bring him in at the stage of the season he did, because it just gave us that other weapon to sort of. So if they did shut down Salem, then you've got Bowie.
George, Harrison Petty.
Harrison Petty, again, similar to May and Lever. When you look at the stats, not very much to show, only 6 disposals, but he spent 95% of time on the ground. He's just part of this backline team, and you've just got to look at the effects of having Petty as part of these 3 talls that we've got down there. Their opposition was English and Norton and Shaki, and Binman's just spoken about this, how little they did in the game. Between the 3 of them, those 3 talls, they had 2 contested marks. So when you've got people like Petty and Lever and May all working together, that's why the forward line of the opposition finished up with 2 contested marks for the whole game. I think Norton would have doubled that in his previous game against Port alone. But, he's once again, just play your role, do it for a long time, keep doing what you've got to do, and he's just turning into this reliable, ever dependable sort of player that we need. You need in a back line. And again, he's another one of these players who's 20 or 21 years of age, not even 21 yet, similar to Bowie, I don't think he's made 20 yet. So, it's remarkable that we've got these old heads that look like they've played hundreds of games, but when you look at the stats, it's certainly not the case, but, gee, they've been prepared well.
Sorry, I had the mic on mute. Christian Salem.
Christian Salem. I won't take this for too long because it could go on and on and on and on. He's our Mr. Silk. This was just an incredible game. 27 disposals off the half-back line. Ever reliable. Is 96% disposal efficiency. He just doesn't.
Nuts.
It's just off the
in a grand final.
It's just off the scale, certainly more than anybody else on the field, and there were a number of players who probably only had 1 or 2 or 3 disposals for the game, but 96% with 27 disposals. Importantly, 22 of them were kicks, so he's delivering, 20 out of 22 times or 21 out of 22 times, he's delivering it straight into the our own players' chests as it was. It just kills the opposition with this sort of accuracy. It's what we've been looking for years. It's what Binman's been talking about for years, about kicking efficiency and kicking accuracy. When the pressure was off, although he did particularly well in the previous 3 quarters, but when the pressure was off in the final quarter, he had 10 touches, including a goal. Although in the first quarter, when the pressure was on, he had 9. So his value is not just in the defensive side of the field; it's also upfield. And when the team is attacking, he had 1 error for the whole game. a single error. It's just incredible. 8 score involvements, an incredibly 639 metres game, and there was only one other person on the whole field. We'll talk about him later, who exceeded that. So Salem was just incredible in this game, and that's why we won a grand final.
I absolutely 1,000,000% agree with that rundown, George. And he would have been a worthy Norm Smith winner. And, Gus would have been too for that matter. But I had him clearly second best player in our team for the match. He was awesome in that first quarter when the heat was on. He was the player who made no errors, as you're saying, but it was really, his calmness, and he doesn't rush his kicks. He doesn't take the kick if it's not there. He holds it. He's happy to hold it even when it's not a mark. He's happy to have players come at him and wait before he kicks. And in that third quarter, it was interesting you're saying in that third quarter, the pressure was fantastic in that from both teams in that third quarter. The pressure rating after 10 minutes in that third quarter, the Dogs was 218. So they came out super hard, and we just sort of were, like you were saying, were repelling their sort of pressure. So they were throwing everything, literally everything they could at us. In the first quarter, when they were, when the game was sort of in flux a little bit and they weren't showing that pressure, he was brilliant. But he was brilliant in that first 10 minutes of that quarter. He held them off. He made good decisions. He was part of that, almost like a wall, sort of repelling that high pressure, and they just couldn't maintain it. And then, so when he gets off the chain, suddenly, he does that defensive stuff super well. So, he relieves pressure by hitting targets. But then he gets off the chain, that pressure's not quite so there, and then he pushes up the ground. And I made notes for the game. In the fourth quarter started with the first goal. Salem wins the contest on the halfback. We transition it. Nibbler, we end up that kick, as I was mentioning before. So Salem set that chain up. Second goal, Frida marks, but Salem set the chain up again from the halfback line. Brilliant kicking from him. Put the note, he would have been a worthy Norm Smith. Not 5 minutes later, another great spoil by Stephen May. 15 minutes. Salem sets up the third goal, so the first 3 goals, which was the kick to track, follow up ground ball collect, and handball to Langdon, who passed to the Nibbler for that shot. So he first 3 goals of the blitz in the fourth quarter are set up by our halfback flanker. So he does all the defensive things you want a halfback flanker to do, and then sets up goals. So I thought he was phenomenal.
I'll contact the Norm Smith panelists and see if we can get a re-adjudication. But
no, happy with it. I've already collected, Andy. You can't take
yeah, sorry. Forgot about that.
We need a Norm and a Smith medal.
George, you got number 24, Trem Rivers.
Yeah, number 24. Once again, another player under the age of 21 who looks like he's played 200 games. He only had 11 disposals for the game, but 6 of those were contested. More importantly, I didn't have the number of spoils. He just manages to get a fist in there when needed, similar to what Hibbert does. But similar to and developing along the Salem line, that he delivers upfield as well. With and in this game, despite only 11 disposals, he had 3 scorer involvements. Playing low time on ground at 66%, but like the others, he just does his job. And when somebody comes off for a rest, he ensures that the back line doesn't lose anything as a result of when a Salem has to come off, or one of the other defenders. He's going to be something special to us in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. George, you've also got the gut runner, Langdon.
Langdon, the running machine, yep. 17 disposals, including 11 in the last quarter. When you let him off the leash, when he has the opportunity, he really gets off the leash in a big way. 96% gay time, he just keeps on running and running. He's that link, really put the Dogs wingers in their place. They were almost ineffective. we've spoken about that effort in the last quarter when he ran the length of the ground to mark and goal, and also not untypically for Langdon, 400 metres gained. It's easy to overlook his efforts when there've been so many other players on the ground with just first-class performances, but he's, again, a critical part of our total infrastructure.
Absolutely. Angus Brayshaw, I thought he was absolutely immense. Perhaps his best game ever for the club, and what a game to do it in. He's made the defensive wing his own, and I've witnessed him blossom into this position all year. Yeah, he's desperate all game, which was epitomised by that diving mark that he took in the third, and then to kick Truly to give us back the lead. He took some heavy hits during the game, and he always got straight back up. 25 disposals, 17 contested, 8 intercepts, 413 metres gained, 7 inside 50s, 6 1%ers, 5 score involvements. It's just a fantastic effort. And as you said, Big Man, you thought that he could also be up there, not quite track level, but definitely in the conversation for the 3-2-1s.
Yeah, he was terrific.
B-Man, you have our captain, the fantastic Max Gawn.
He had an underrated game, I reckon. He's not getting sort of the kudos. He's definitely a victim of his ability and of maybe one of the greatest games of a finals game ever in the prelim. I tend to sort of agree with that idea that Lazy posted, is that I think there was too much emphasis. I think that was always a play for them to consider, to move him around, and I think that to have him taken out and be able to Jackson to come in meant threw their planning out of whack, I reckon. But it's easy to think his game, I thought, was a lot better and a lot more sort of important than maybe it looked at first. At first viewing, he had 2 really important contested marks in that first quarter that intercepts. He's remarkable for his athleticism is remarkable when he's not quite another midfielder. But having said that, he got. I'm just looking here. He's where is it? The clearances numbers. So he had 6 clearances, and he's been knocking up getting clearances. And the other one that for him is that he had 6 inside 50s. So he's really important the way he moves around. I don't think he played as much defence this time as stand to be corrected as he did in the last few weeks. But he really obviously looked to run Martin around. I thought Martin did a pretty good job, I have to say. And Martin definitely went in with a game plan to physically just sort of not hit him, but to negate him. It's just to sort of any hit out that wasn't to advantage was a win for Martin, I think. But I reckon they tactically they played that really smart. They took him out and meant that they sort of, maybe they didn't plan for Jackson as well as they might have. Maybe they didn't think that through in terms of, well, what happens if we have to come up against Jackson. Their plan seemed to be structured around, let's stop Maxi, stop Melbourne. And I think that's something that is becoming apparent to that's a real strength of ours, is that we've got multiple ways to defend, we've got multiple ways to score, we've now got multiple ways to ruck. Even that idea of bringing Bowie in, we've got multiple Salems, we've got multiple intercept marking. So Lever has not such a big game. Then you've got someone like obviously Petty, but even a Rivers starts taking intercept marks. So I think that it's a challenge for oppositions, and Max is a classic example of it. I just say the other thing is that he's become just a spiritual leader of the Melbourne Footy Club. It's just not possible for me to be more impressed in how clear he's been about his commitment to the club and the fans, and how awesome he is for that people were cheering for him everywhere he went, in both the prelim, the captain's run, and the grand final. What an ambassador for the Melbourne Footy Club, and he's really very strong on history. He says it himself. He knows what's happened in the past, even in the post game, to have the wherewithal to name check people who had died and who this meant to. I could not be more impressed with him as a person. I know you sponsor him, Andy.
Yeah.
And I presume you've met him,
plenty of times.
Lots of times. Is he that impressive? Is he as impressive as he appears?
He's just a genuine bloke. You put him in any situation with any person, he'll just talk to, people. Some people might be a bit shy or reserved. He can just talk to anyone about anything and shows genuine interest when you're talking to him. And it's not a feigned interest or anything. He's genuinely interested in everyone I've ever seen him interact with, whether it's been me or me just seeing him talk to someone else. Just a top shelf bloke. And I actually messaged him after the game, not expecting anything back from him, and I know that I've heard him say that after the prelim they got into the grade, his phone blew up, and I had messaged him then, and I wasn't expecting, I didn't hear back from him. I got a message this morning, thanks Andy, and I'm sure he had 1,000,001 messages and he didn't have to do that, and I'm not big noting myself that I got that, but it just shows the type of bloke that he is. So I just love the guy. I can't wait to see him. Hopefully, as part of the sponsors function, we get to touch that cup. But yeah, I love the guy. I really wish he would have kicked that goal when he was running in, like the goal he kicked last week. That icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Also, Track had one like that running in. I would have loved him to have kicked that, but Max.
You've got to get him on the show next year, Andy. I mean,
it's not so hard because you can't go. It's not about going through him. It's all got to be through the club, and they're a bit more precious with the top line people. And fair enough. Like Max, think of how much media he did in the lead up to that grand final. He was on everything. It was pictured everywhere, and he just does it. He doesn't sound or look like just another one. Even if he probably feels that way, it never comes across that way.
He's so good. And the other thing that is really important, I reckon, in terms of his leadership, everyone will have noted that they had a mantra about we're just going to be us, and he has lived that as a captain. He's, even said it during the week.
That's him. What you see is what you get. Yeah.
And he's going to do it like he's going to do it, and he'll take on advice, and and he doesn't expect his teammates to do anything different. He is such a part of what's happened. I can't even I haven't got the words for how much important he's going to go down. Like Ronald Dale Barassi. I mean, it's not just the fact that he's the captain of this team; it's everything that he's done in this last a number of years. But
he's a five-time
since he's become captain.
5-time All-Australian. He's a captain. He's a premiership captain. He's the captain of the All-Australian. He's He's in the conversation now of one of the greatest Melbourne Football Club players of all time. Up there with Barassi, and I know Barassi has the more premierships, but it's a bit of a different time now, and. Certainly,
but also just his influence as much as anything. His influence on this footy club, his teammates love him. There was always that query about whether he'd be too much of a jokester to be a good captain.
Put to bed now.
So he's put that to bed completely. But most of all, his on-field thing is brilliant, and just even it felt a bit like he was sacrificing his game for the greater good, and that is just so the whole team. But Maxi lives and breathes that ethos.
I'm going to play this because I've got it up on Twitter now because I wrote something about it, and I love it. As there's a bit where that apparently Max insisted that Jacko stay in the middle while he was hot, and I'll play this. It's 40 seconds of Goody's presser. Let me make sure the sound's up. Let me play this. Okay.
Christian's second half of the third quarter. Can you talk us through that?
Extraordinary. I thought all our inside mids, that centre bounce dominance in the third quarter. I thought Luke Jackson came into the centre bounce and was sensational, along with Christian Clayton, and obviously Jack were in there. But to get that type of momentum in a big game, that's full of resilience and character. But it was led by, Jacko, and our inside mids got to work. So Jacko's been building that for a little while, and Max in the end came off and said, "You got to keep him in there." And that's credit to our culture. That selfless nature, and when someone's hot, let them go.
So it was Max, while Jacko was having that purple patch, that he said just keep him in there.
Yeah.
That's that selfless culture.
I actually think it's more evidence of Goody, because of course it's a nice thing for him to say, but Goody will have planned that, of course. And I mean, we talk about the two of them work out those timings on field anyway, but there's still a master plan in terms of how often. And I have no doubt that one of their tactical things that they looked to do was to do exactly that, to disrupt their planning by giving Jackson more centre bounces. So
I think that's the plan. But then he was even hotter than that, and Max, he said, well, it's my turn to come on, but I'll stay back.
Goody's not going to do that. Like, Goody's going to go, Max, no, whatever, go back into the ruck if he wants him to go back.
If he wanted him to go back, of course. Yeah. But Max is probably saying he's hot, and I think Goodwin knew he was hot, and look what happened.
Yeah.
I think if you have a look at the replay, after we kicked the first 2 goals of that run in the middle of the third quarter, Goody and Burgess were involved in a very deep discussion.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think Burgess was being asked, how long do we keep Jackson on? How long do we keep Max on at the same time? So
100%.
Yeah.
I've got the next one, probably the best one to have. Christian Petrarca, possibly the best game I've ever witnessed from a Melbourne player, up there with Max Gawn's effort last week, and on the biggest stage to boot. Dusty has been very special in 3 grand finals, but I think Track was better in this one. Let's hope he can win 3 flags or more, so that he can, Richmond supporters can't say, but Dusty did it 3 times. He was an absolute beast, moving and bullocking through traffic in the middle, exploding with pace all over the ground, finding space to get that mark at half back or at half forward, delivering the ball with precision, kicked 2 of the best goals you'll see at high pressure times. That first one off 1 step from 50, the second the dribbler from the boundary, starting that minute of madness, or correctly I should say 31 seconds of madness. The minute of madness rolls off the tongue better. If Bont had one hand on the Norm Smith 12 minutes into the third, Petrarca has ripped his arm off and stuffed it in his pocket. 40 disposals, and I'm not recognising the retraction of that one of his handballs. 24 contested possessions, 2 goals, 896 metres gained. That is incredible. 11 inside 50s, 15 score involvement, 9 clearances, 8 intercepts, 4 tackles, 1 Norm Smith, 1 premiership medal. And I absolutely love that he tucked the Norm Smith medal into his jumper so as not to separate or distinguish his efforts above his teammates. And that just shows the quality of bloke that he is. We have a very, very, very special player on our hands. Thank you, St Kilda Football Club.
What a performance. What a performance. What a performance. There's footy, like it's on Demonland, and one of the great things about watching the replay on KO is that, and in fact, if I can, I watch the games on KO rather than the 7 feed, because I love watching the no ads and just seeing the players after he kicks that goal, where he hit Bonanza. Like, what? I just love that goal. Like he's in the flow zone, wasn't he, at that point? That ball split, literally went over that line that sort of marks halfway.
It was never going anywhere else. I never thought it was not going to be a goal.
It was magnificent. But then directly after that, if you've seen the KO thing where there's no ads, he's hardly going to celebrate. He looks like he is just completely... Like he's got the eye on the prize. He just looked like a man who was on a mission, and he's great, isn't he? He's fantastic, and he's such a likable fella. But that's the game that he's always, always thought he could play. And again, is that his best game of footy he's ever played at Melbourne?
Has to be.
Well,
he's there 40 possessions and all the old quality and.
Yeah, Gus the same. You'd have to say 6 goals from Fritters up there. I mean, It's just incredible to be able to do that on the day when you need to do it. And he's just become he's another leader, isn't he? He's become such a great leader, and he speaks so well. And so one of the things I've really loved about the whole Melbourne thing, and in particular afterwards, is how emotionally honest he is, and how emotionally honest Goody is, and how okay that is. Like, there's no faux tough guy stuff, and he's so from the heart, but it's just sincere. And I think Goody can be really proud of the culture he's created where that's okay. And I reckon Gorney plays a role in that to show emotion and to be in touch with that stuff. And he's an awesome footballer, but it seems like an awesome person. So that's a pretty great combination.
If you want to know what type of an awesome person he is, I saw something online today about there was a kid. I don't know if he had cystic fibrosis or something, and I apologise, I don't know exactly what the ailment was, but he met him before he'd even played a game of football or one of those hospital visits. I think it was even Melbourne at the time, but the kid, I think they're from Tasmania maybe now, and they were in at the grand final with in Perth. I'm not sure if Tracker organised tickets for him, but he knew exactly where they were after the game, and he went over and had a photo with this kid, and it just shows you the type of bloke that he is, because in a moment when he could just be off celebrating with his mates, he's taken that time to give the thing, and he's not doing it for the photo op or anything like that, because that's not the type of bloke he is. And yeah, top shelf bloke. George, anything you want to add on the track?
Oh, I think you've covered that off pretty well. There really isn't anything else to add at all. It's, we've got our own version of Dusty, but it's not a version of Dusty. This is the Petrarca version of Petrarca. It's just brilliant that we've got him available to us. And like you said, thank you very much, St Kilda.
It's funny you should say that, George, because he was asked something about that comparison and he bristled. Like, you don't see him bristle very often, but he bristled. It's like, I'm me. That's what he basically said. And then it goes back to that theme that we're just going to be us. That's the theme that they've, really stuck by this last few weeks.
George, Bin Man, you are Clayton Oliver. He's a bit of a forgotten sort of player in the Petrarca show, but he was equally as fantastic.
I'll go back to what I was saying last week. Everyone talking about, when we're comparing the midfields, and everyone's saying, well, that's an advantage of the Bulldogs is how good their midfield is. I mean, I think the argument's gone now, isn't it? They might have more midfielders, but we've got a better midfield, and that's even with Bontempelli. Because Clayton Oliver, no one's talking up his game. He was instrumental in that first quarter, as only behind Salem, I reckon, in terms of more important than.
Does anyone have his stats for that first quarter? Because I remember them saying he'd had like 9 possessions or something at some crazy early time. Yeah.
I did have him, but he had 33 disposals for the match, sort of, which is relatively low for him, but it's still 8 more than McRae. And I think he played a bit more of a defensive game than he would have otherwise. It's interesting because the other thing about Track's game is he took Bontempelli quite often, and I reckon Oliver took McRae a bit. But I'll need to look at that. But if it's not always the fantasy points isn't necessarily a great guide, but it's actually not a bad guide because it counts 1%ers and a number of things. His Track had 139 in the fantasy points. Oliver had 138.
But you know why?
Sorry.
Do you know why? 10 tackles.
Who for Oliver?
Oliver had 10, and that tackles gets quite a few points, I believe.
Yeah.
And
but that's
I'm not taking away. I'm just saying that the 10 tackles is fantastic. So I'm saying that he had 10 tackles in his game, and that's fantastic.
They're often sort of people go, oh, that's not a good. It's actually not a bad measure of a sort of as a general snapshot. And so he's not that. My point is really that he wasn't. Track had a game out of the box, but he wasn't that far behind Track, and yet no one's really pumping up his tyres the way they are Salem, for instance. And again, it's probably he's that good that a 33 disposal game in a grand final with 14 kicks, handballs, and his 6 clearances I think he had, so 5 clearances, so that's not huge for him, but that's still by any measure that's an impressive performance. So he's, I think now that's, I forget it off the top of my head, but it's like 120 consecutive games or something like that he's played. He's a machine. He's an absolute machine, and it's great that they're crediting for how selfless he is and that he's become a complete team player. And I heard Gorney say, or someone say that Gorney had said that he's the best team player in the team. So he's come a long way as both as a person and sort of teammate, but as a player, he's unbelievable player now. So you could hardly even split who's a better player between Petrarca. They're different. So I think that, two of them are worth 4 of most other teams' midfield players.
34 pressure acts as well, the highest for the team.
Yeah, incredible. And still nearly 471 metres gained. He's getting, as we've talked about all season, he's getting out the front of contests, almost 90% time on ground. That goal was exactly what I want to see from him.
Phenomenal. He's got to do more of that because I know he can do it.
Oh, well, he's down on the big, I think one of the things for both him, but it's actually the whole team. And I made a note, and it's funny, it's sort of, none of us have touched on it, is how often we broke tackles. They're a fit, strong team. They're the second best team in the AFL, Dogs. It's not like we're coming up against the Suns. And Oliver and Petrarca, but not just them, McDonald, all of our players were refusing to get brought down being able to release the ball.
How was that kick he got out in the last quarter when he was tackled by 3 players and he still managed to get out and kick it forward?
Yeah, insane. Totally insane. So, he was brilliant. And another player who probably, he's probably got a few in front of him, but he would have been a worthy Norm Smith too, and no one's even banging on about his game. So,
absolutely. The other man, the man built for finals, Jack Viney. I thought he had a sensational game, and B-Man, you're going to talk about him.
Who?
Jack Viney, sorry. What did I call him, Todd Viney?
Yeah, I thought he was another underrated player. He's, I thought similarly in the sense that, he wasn't talked about it as much, but important in a different way. And George mentioned it earlier, is that in that first quarter when the whips were cracking, a lot of his defensive work's really hard to see. But like the tackle that I referenced before, on Bailey Smith, he tackles fairly and hard. He plays like rugby, so that when they, in rugby, it's all about making sure that the multiple tackles add up, because then they start getting weary by the end of the game. And, he does that better than anyone I've seen play footy. And he was quiet in some. I was really surprised he had 25 possessions, because I was trying to look at what those numbers were. But he was a pure inside mid. He only had 200 metres gained. He made a couple of sort of sketchy inside 50s, one in particular where he sort of kicked into space with no one there, but it looked like there was maybe a disconnect with who he was trying to kick. I think he was trying to get it to Cozzy to run onto, and it didn't sort of connect up. He had 6 tackles, so, 4 less than Clayton, 12 clearances. That's the thing. I don't know actually what Liberatore got, but they're often compared. I'll have a look in a sec.
I've got it out. 7 to Liberatore, 5 for Bontempelli, 5 for Dunkley, 4 for McRae.
So 5 to Bontempelli, 7 to Liberatore. You add those two together and you get 12. Jack Viney.
Yeah.
And those clearances, you don't even, especially in such a high-scoring game, and there's a question on the chat, is that the best football you've ever seen? And in a game, it is for me. It was incredible football. So the inside clearance work isn't what jumps out at you. 12 clearances. I presume that's a game high, 12 clearances. I don't think anyone else got any more than that. That's huge. You've got to win it at the coalface to get it going. And but more importantly, you've got to negate their model, because they have that model of winning it on the inside. So, if I was a Doggies fan, I'd be thinking that Liberatore lowered his colours to Jack.
James Harms, big man, take him away.
Yeah, I thought Harmsy had a great game. I think that that kick to Frida,
beautiful kick,
was, that's been sort of spoken about as the moment that the game turned. But, I agree with George. The game was turning. We were grinding. Funnily enough, going from Viney to Harms.
Well, that was Viney's work to knock it.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of that, it was more his intent. He didn't really do anything, Viney. It was more that he hit the pack at pace and kicked the ball forward. And I think from memory, didn't Bailey Smith fumble it in that exchange?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and I thought that was really symbolic. That's the difference between a hardened footballer and a young pup. He didn't have a great game, Bailey Smith. As I was saying last week, they gave him it came to pass. They didn't give him any front space to run into and physically look to put him off his game. And Viney, that was the moment almost. The two sort of passed. And but for Harms,
before you go back to Harms quickly, Viney again out of the centre of one of those in the minute of madness. It was also one of his just hitting the pack, and he got his foot to the ball, which knocked it forward. Then I think Jackson picked it up for the Oliver goal maybe, or might have been the Sparrow goal. But yeah, it was also his bullocking through and getting sort of a toe to it and getting it forward. So another thing that might not be a stat or a small stat, and it's not really seen by the wider community, but I recognised it. And anyway, Harms.
So I thought he had not an amazing game. He had 154 metres gained, which is not huge, but he didn't play much midfield time, did he, George? And he saw almost like half forward flanker. I've been really interested. I've been tracking a bit more, George, since you pointed out around time on ground. He only had 71%. They really use those players, don't they, to make sure that they've got, so to be able to have Petrarca to have 94%, you have to be able to move those players around. And it's like a sort of fleet of halfback flankers and half forward flankers. I thought it was his most composed game that I've seen him play in some respects, and that kick was the symbolic of that. It was a beautiful kick, and one of my favourite things is that sort of kick where they kick to the forward space and weight it properly. And Fritsch gave that. Fritsch moved so smoothly. He didn't seem to be even going at that ball hard, but the defender had no chance of stopping it. And it was just a lovely kick by Harms. I think I put a note. I was wondering whether he was putting time into Daniels, but I don't think he was. And so I wasn't really sure what the matchup was. Did you know who he was matching up on, George?
He was splitting it between him and Neil Bullen certainly in the first three quarters.
For Daniels.
So Daniels, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, look, I thought he was, he didn't have, his best game, but he made no errors and no brain, and I think he played within himself, and I prefer it when he does that. He definitely didn't tag, which was really interesting. And I often felt that when hasn't got a specific role, he can try too much. So I really like the fact that he didn't in this game, and he didn't the occasion didn't sort of mean that he went for too much. Again, another player who's so strong in the contest, doesn't get brought down, gets the hands off, and he's really been consistent in the last 6-7 weeks and had a good game.
Did make one mistake. There was that handball that resulted in Bont's goal to put them 19 points up, but we'll excuse that considering what came later. I've got Alex Neil-Bullen, really been impressed with the step up that Nibbler has taken this year. We've always known that his work rate and endurance is elite, but this year he's getting his hands on the ball more. His defensive pressure acts are through the roof. He's spending more time at stoppages around the ground. He's classified as a small forward, but with the introduction of Cozzy and Spargs, he's been able to get back a lot more and had more touches in the back half in the granny than he had in the front half. 24 possessions, 5 marks, 5 intercepts, 10 score involvements, 25 pressure acts, which I think is second highest in the team. Arguably sealed the game with the goal from 50 in the last. He's been a much maligned player by a lot of people, whether it's on Demonland or online, but he's very deserving of that premiership medallion. He's capped off a great breakout year with a great game in the grand final. I was really impressed with him.
I love him.
Yeah. Next, I got Tom McDonald. T-Mac would probably be the first person to tell you that he didn't have a stellar final series after a terrific year, which the year began with him being told to explore his options. Despite low possession game capped off by 2 final term goals, he does take a good defender away from Ben Brown. He provides some blocking in those contests where Brown gets a free fly at it, and his hard work on the line provided a clear path for Sparrow's third term goal. It'll be interesting to see what next year holds, but beware the person that writes him off, as many did last year. So, look, he didn't have a great game. His dad's kicked 2 in the end, 2 in last quarter, but look, he takes a player away. Otherwise Brown's getting double teamed. You need him in the team, and he was the next best big big forward. So
he made a couple of errors too, didn't he? He looked a bit nervous.
He did. Next one, I've got Tom Sparrow. Bloody love this kid's game. He's Viney Junior, but in age only. He's a strong body, never stops competing and running, has a beautiful long straight kick of goal. Could easily have had 2 long goals to his name in a grand final. There was that one, I think, it was sort of touched by Max and the defender before it went through. He has an excellent infield kick. He hit up Fritsch early for Fritsch's first, and in the last he hit up Benny Brown for his third goal. Only had the 14 possessions, the 20 pressure acts, 6 score involvements, 5 inside 50s, and as I mentioned, that beautiful long goal. All my neutral mates were asking me, where have we been hiding this kid? And as I've mentioned on this podcast before, we've been hiding him in plain sight. He's been there most of the year, whether he's coming on as the medical sub. He's been thereabouts, fully deserved his spot in the team. Wrapped for him, and he's got a bright future learning under the feet of some great midfielders.
Yeah, he's come on very nicely, hasn't he? And again, another one of these under 21 players in our side, but he's in the last 6 to 8 weeks he's really fallen into the speed of the game and what's required. He just looks like he's just part of the future and part of the now is the reality. There was no loss when Sparrow went into the middle or was around the packs. He is the next Jack Viney, right there, like you said, in plain sight for everyone to see.
Binman, you've got Luke Jackson.
Luke Jackson is going to be an absolute star of this competition. Like X Factor's probably underselling him. Interesting, the numbers-wise, he didn't really have a massive game. Only 13 disposals. And he took the 3 marks, which surprised me when I saw it. Sort of 5 kicks, 8 handballs. It's just... he's one of those players who doesn't need many possessions.
It's what they do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, two things that jumped out for me. 2 of the numbers that jumped out for me was he had 6 contested possessions, which is, like that's a lot of, it's nearly half of his contested possessions, obviously. And his assists, he had the most assists, goal assists in the team. So 4 goal assists, Sparrow, just speaking of Sparrow, he had 3. The next one was track at 2. So it just sort of shows that, I wonder, it's probably overselling their basketball connection, but, basketball's all about assists, and it's really interesting that he's setting up goals for others. And, I think the defining feature for him that sort of, and it became apparent, as like I was saying before, is it's a bit of a throwaway line, but he's like an extra midfield. So he doesn't have to win the ruck contest to suddenly be a damaging player, as we saw in that burst of goals. At least one of them was a direct result of his ability to win the ball once it's hit the ground. And for a fella who's, is a ruckman / forward / ruckman, what an incredible skill set. It's going to be really interesting to watch the relationship between him and Max, and I think that that's going to continue to develop the way they work together tactically. I could see a match where he spends the whole. I could still see a match where Gawn, Rucks, and Jackson plays as a mid. That'll happen at some point. Amazing skill set. Love that he went back and kicked the goals. His disposal efficiency was the other number that jumped out. It was up in the 90s, 92.3. I mean, it's a 13 stats, but he's actually technically a really good kick, and he flushed that one, the goal that he got. He's sort of shortened his run up, and he's going to be a reliable shot for goal. I think his inaccuracy that he's sort of experienced at different times, probably nerve related rather than technique. He's just going to be a superstar, I think. And he had a great game, very influential game for 13 possessions.
Maybe it's not the time to talk about it, but are you worried? His contract is up at the end of next year, and I'm sure there'll be lots of angst during next year about this. But now that he's won a premiership, and I'm not saying anything about his loyalty, but he is a Western Australian boy. Don't know what the COVID situation's going to be next year, but if Western Australia's living in freedom and we're under lockdown, might be an attractive thing to go home. And now that you've got the premiership, not worried at all. I stay up at night. I know that, and I'm not. As I said, I'm not questioning his loyalty at all. But it's things like this keep me up at night. This is the MFCSS that'll never go away. You haven't gotten rid of it. It's only made it stronger now because I want more. This worries me. Trent Rivers as well. Like I want these guys to be 300 game players for the Demons, and they can be. I'm not questioning their loyalty at all, but it is a concern.
He's talking about Maxi being a father figure. So
I know. I love that. That's going to help me sleep tonight. I don't know if it will help me sleep in a few weeks' time.
He'll have to go all Darth Vader on us for,
No, and I'm not. I wouldn't begrudge. If someone wants to go home, whatever, I've never begrudged them. But there is a concern when you get anyone from another state. It always will be a concern at some point.
Well, not next year. So he'll have two grand final wins.
Well, that's then he's gone out the door. No, he might want 3-peat. But and again, I'm not questioning. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
You've got to change from MFCSS to MFC gluttony.
I don't know what it is. I just want to win. It's all out of love.
Is that you're in remission?
Yeah, not anymore. It's gone. No, just went to the back. This you guys have made it worse when you're talking about all the good. But it's not. Now it's going to come out because I want to win. I just want to be the best.
Well, we can win without him. We can win with him, but he's going to be a star.
No, I want him. I want this guy chained to the MCG. George, did you want to add anything to Jackson? Otherwise,
nothing more. Yeah.
Okay. Charlie Spargo, big man.
Yeah, probably Spargo was just about our weakest player almost, I'd have to say. He didn't have a great game, I didn't think. He didn't actually look like he was enjoying it. Looked frustrated, certainly when he gave that free kick away to Hunter, which was a classic small forward thing that he's probably done a million times himself, dropping the shoulder and and all power to Hunter. He went back and kicked it, didn't he? So again, it's hard to see with the pressure, but I don't think his pressure was certainly where he's been. By far not his best game. I think, you'll find that he's probably pretty disappointed, and he looked that way at the end of the game. He only had 7 possessions, but as we know, that's not the be-all and end-all for the small forwards.
Kicked a goal,
yeah. He kicked a goal. It was a good, it was a smart goal in the sense that he could have easily given that off. It was the right play to go. So, yeah, he kicked a goal. But I don't know that his pressure was as where it normally is, but it's really hard to tell. What was really interesting about Spargo's numbers, though, was he only had 58% time on ground. That's low. I don't know what he averages, but surely it's not 58%.
It would be higher than that, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder whether he was injured because that's really low for him.
Well, he had the ankle, remember, in the scratch match or that training.
Yeah, so maybe his ankle was worse than what they discussed, and 58% for a sort of pressure forward is low. Maybe it also is part of the shape of the game was that it wasn't as significant and a factor than the sort of pressure forward. I don't know, maybe, but yeah, perhaps that the injury, but certainly I think he would be disappointed in that game, as probably T-Mac would. The 2 goals that he got probably saved some blushes in some respects.
Still 2 goals in a grand final.
Yeah,
everyone will forget about that and just look at the stat. Oh wow, he had a fantastic game.
If we ever meet, I can say, oh yeah, we've kicked 2 goals between us in a grand final.
Just like I tell Max that between us we got 5 All Australians and premiership between us.
They must find those jokes funny.
He thinks it's hilarious. I tell everyone that I made him the player he is today. Benny Brown, expert piece of drafting by whoever came up with the idea to bring him over to the D's. Big, bad, bustling Benny Brown is exactly the tonic that this forward line needed. His work rate up the ground is great. He makes a contest of every ball that comes his way. He's a beautiful straight set shot kick for goal. I love his 1,000-metre run-up, 10 disposals, 4 marks, 2 contested, 8 score involvements, 3 goals in the grand final. He's just, chef's kiss. Not much more to say. We needed to bring in someone who could take marks and kick goals, and I love the fact that he got 4 free kicks in the game as well.
Sorry, George. Go.
Yeah, he's everything we needed in this game. It wasn't just the marking ability, but it was the ability to bring it to ground and the ability to contest. That certainly I think it was 2 of Fritsch's goals were as a result of Brown actually causing the ball to spill out the back, for example. So he's been a big positive, and credit again to the fitness and conditioning staff. He's playing a completely different role from the roles that he was playing at North Melbourne, where he was a lead-up type forward. He's moving much further up the ground, much more competitive in the air. He's been a real revelation since he's come into the side, exactly what we needed.
That's exactly what I was going to say, George. And I think the recruiting team deserve a huge pat on the back just generally. But for him, he's been huge. And the fact that he can rely on to kick those goals, it takes a lot of pressure off. But, I mean, he was on the goal line, defensive goal line, literally all the way at one point. I couldn't believe it. I think in the goal that – I think the one Joe Hannison.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, right. I was thinking, is that Ben Brown? It's like, why don't you spoil, buddy? But it's like, that's a long way from home, isn't it, for a lead-up forward, as you say, George? And I haven't really sort of drilled in. There's an article about him, and I haven't read it yet. But he was another one who's being emotionally honest, and even in the post-match on the ground, they had interviews with players, including him, and he sort of intimated that he was close to quitting or retiring, and that he really struggled with the idea of getting basically sacked from the Roos. I mean, how's that? He's could have been at the team that finishes last or the team that ultimately wins the grand final. What a turnaround! But it sounded like he had some real struggles with whether he was going to be able to make it back to AFL level. And he's a Coleman medalist, isn't he? So I thought he was really important, George, as you say, from structurally, but sort of that undersells it a bit. Just the sort of obviously they go to him more often than T-Mac. And he takes his marks, kicks his goals, and he's definitely improved his tackling and pressure. That's 100% been a big change for him. So, he played the game that we recruited him for, and 3 goals. Speaking of goals in grand finals, he could have ended up with 5 easily.
And we'll as a teaser for what we might talk about in the season review, we'll discuss where Wiedemann, now having signed a contract for 2 years, where he fits into this, because as we know, T-Mac and Ben Brown are heading towards the 30 age. Need someone else to fill that void. So there's your teaser for what we might talk about. So boys, have a think about it. How's the forward line got to look next year? So that was Ben Brown. You've got big man. You've got Cozzy Pickett.
Yeah, another one, not unlike Spargo, would be not super happy with his game. I don't think. It was funny. We talked last week about that game that last year where he only had 4 possessions, and I was saying, but it's all about pressure. And it was true of this game, wasn't it? He only had 4 possessions in this game, 2 handballs and 2 kicks, no goals. He didn't have no goals, and but 2 brilliant bits of pressure set up that goal that Spargo got.
That was all him.
All him. That was not going to be a goal.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it was. And that's, like I said, that was so similar to round 21, is like the fact that they tried to short kick that out of their defensive zone and kicked it to Jackson, didn't they, in the end? And it was all the pressure he put on. And then there was the block that George talked about that set up where it gave space for Track to kick that brilliant Dacos-like goal. And, then there's all the pressure he does around the ground. So for a player who, I would say that if you were comparing Spargo and Cozzy's game, Cozzy had a pretty good game, even with 4 possessions. Not the game that he would have liked, because obviously he would have liked to get amongst it and kick some goals. But his KPI is the pressure he applies, and he probably met that KPI for the game. He, as I say, probably be a bit disappointed in himself that he could only manage the 4 possessions, didn't kick a goal, but. Good pressure level. So, another player's he's only a kid, and he's going to be someone we're going to watch for 10 years. So, I love him as a character, and I loved the shots after the game of him hugging his family in the crowd, and it was just that almost brought a tear to my eye. He's, and I read a bit about him during the week. Seems like a cracking young bloke who's had a fair bit of stuff going on for him, family-wise, moving to Western Australia to Adelaide, and he's was with his uncle, and by all accounts, just a total ripping young man.
And you can see, obviously didn't have a great day in terms of contribution, despite the two bits of play we talked about, but he was happy as Larry with that premiership medallion, and it just goes to show it's not just that game, it's the whole year. If you didn't have a great year, same with Tom McDonald, didn't have a great game, but they had such fantastic years. They are so deserving of those medals, if not just for what they've done during the year, and we'll give them their due credit when we do our review show. Who knows when that'll be, but it'll be soon.
Yeah. Didn't you love it when he tried to give his medal to Neville Jetta at the end?
Neville was having none of that.
Yeah. That was fantastic.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. But didn't you feel like it felt like Neville's retired?
Well, no, he has. We're going to talk about that at the end. You might have missed that. Just happened as we were going to air just before.
Okay, well, he looked just inconsolable on the field, and that was really upsetting to see him how inconsolable Jets looked.
And I can see some players wouldn't want to accept something and Neville's the type of guy, he would think that, not that he didn't deserve it, but that he didn't, it's hard to put that into words.
He would have been just upset because of his career's sort of finishing up, and I don't think he held any grudge or anything.
No, not at all.
Just got to keep him at the club.
Yeah. 100%. Got to keep him, unless there's some opportunity for him that's more beneficial. But, if they can keep him as some mentor role down there, it'd be great, because he's a great person.
Yeah.
I got Bailey Fritsch, 6 goals in a grand final. Wow, just wow. Deservedly second to track, maybe Salem, but and Clary, but really deserved to be up there. Who would have thought that 6 goals doesn't get you a Norm Smith in a granny? But track was phenomenal, and Fritsch was just a Fritsch magnet, as was coined in the Adelaide game. 5 marks and 9 score involvements. He led well. He kicked well. He kicked exceptionally. If he had kicked exceptionally, he could have had 8. A near perfect game in my book. A perfect game. Umpires, although if we had the umpires from the Adelaide game, the umpires might still have given Seedsman and Keys the 3 and the 2 votes. Still shaking my head at that one. That's Bailey Fritsch.
He's a smooth mover, isn't he? I like that the goal that he got when Williams, who had just as George noted before, had a shocker, didn't he, the poor fella? He just knows when he's got space. So many players would have, the one where it came off his hands and he sort of turned, so many players would think that just, especially, the pressure of a grand final, would sort of hurriedly put it on the boot, but he takes a couple of steps, balances up and kicks it. He's such a classy mover, and he's another player. There seems to be a real theme. Jackson's similar, really level-headed, enjoy themselves, but don't seem to get too overawed by things. He's such an underrated player in some respects. He's our leading goal scorer, most goals since Jarman in '95 in a final. Fantastic.
From the 59 goals, 24 points from the 24 games. His previous best was last year from the 16 games, 22 goals and 24 behinds. And then he had 20 and 17 the previous years. So it's just fantastic. He's getting better and better.
And as George has noted, it's a problem for the opposition because what do you do with them? Like, who do you put on him?
Yeah.
And you've got to put someone on him, but like you need to put someone he's a pure lead and mark player.
Yeah, he can, but he can do both. He can get behind you and take a mark over you.
And he keeps his feet. Yep. He can score off the ground. Kick right foot.
How good was that goal that he kicked? The second one where he nearly took the screamer over the top. Hit the way he hit the ground and was baked straight onto the ball like a cat.
And smashed it through too. I loved it.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
I've got James Jordan. That's it with the players. We're up to the medical sub. Obviously, James didn't get a chance to take the field, and I truly believe that he deserves the medal, as I mentioned, for the body of work he put in this year. Gutted for him, as I am for Jones and Nev and Hunt and Smith and Tomlinson, that they couldn't be on the ground just like him.
Don't be gutted for him. He was sitting on the, there's no worries about that at all.
Yeah, but a competitive kid like that would have been busting his chops to get on. It wasn't to be. Do you think we should have tried to squeeze him on late? I don't know what the protocol is. Daisy said it's probably not what did she say? She's probably not within the spirit of that rule. But now that we know that May had that hammy, and I know players want to be on the ground at the end, and I wouldn't suggest taking that away from anybody. And I heard that Harmsy, top bloke that he is, wanted to sacrifice his spot on the field or on the bench to let him on. Do you have any thoughts on that, guys? Hopefully it's not his last chance for true premiership glory.
I actually think, because I heard on the SEN call that I heard today, they were banging on about it, and Healy, who was saying, you got to do it, Actually, I think it's just a sign of how disciplined this footy club is. You don't do it. Like, they haven't done it all season. Yes, it's a grand final.
70 points up or 60 points up to do it.
To me, it's a symbolic of how disciplined this club is.
Yep.
And that Goodwin goes, I'd love to, but this is not, this is not how we do it.
Yep.
And for me, I reckon that's him. Whilst I'd love for him to have come on the ground if he want, obviously he'd want to. To me, that says something pretty powerful that they didn't do the easy thing and let someone come off to have him come on.
In order to come off, you've got to have a medical assessment. The doctor's actually got to say this guy medically can't go back on. There was absolutely no way that Stephen May was going to come off the ground.
You have to.
So you're going to ask the doctor, for example, even if Harms wants to come off, you're going to ask the doctor to basically tell a lie.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jordan will have plenty of other opportunities.
Yeah.
It was critical in this particular game that the three big midfielders that we got, and the fourth with Sparrow, had to be in there to play against the Dogs midfield. Jordan was unfortunate just at the wrong time, but there's always a sad story in every grand final of someone who didn't quite make it. That goes back a long way. But Jordan will have plenty of opportunities coming into the future. Like a lot of the players in this game that have got a premiership medallion around their necks this year, you've just got to keep working to get into the side and the success will come.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a really sad thing that I heard, I saw on Twitter from Sir Swamp Thing, who does all the stats. No grand final team has ever played together in any game ever again. All those...
All 22.
All 22 or 23 now, but whatever, 22 have never, ever played another game all together. Which makes sort of sense because you have people retiring and people leaving and injuries and all that. But, yeah, it's just sad that we won't see those 22 players play again.
It's too early for sadness.
No, just not even the MFCSS talking here. I don't think we can do a grand final wrap-up without acknowledging our premiership-winning coaching department led by Simon Goodwin. there were a number of people on Demonland and online who weren't convinced that Goody excuse me, could lead us to the promised land. And I myself at times had some doubts. I've voiced it on the podcast, not vehemently, I might add, as others have done, but I have had my doubts, particularly in 2019 and the early parts of 2020. But we have adjusted our game plan, and the attitudes of players have shifted in that time. And then the injection of like Adamuze has no doubt have a massive impact on the direction of the team. And I can't thank this coaching team enough. We often forget them in the celebration of the players out on the field, but their contribution and sacrifice to bring us this premiership is just as important. And Goody is a premiership coach now, and he thoroughly deserves that honour and respect. And I love this whole coaching team: Choco, Alan Richardson, Chaplin, Stafford, all of them. Thank you from us, all of us at Demonland. We know coaches cop it at times, but I just love what they've done with this team.
Amazing, really. And one thing that jumped out at me actually is that his emotional honesty's gone to a sort of whole another level of really live that mantra. I mean, he was talking about in that presser, it was quite an emotional presser, crying on the Friday, the night before the game. And, that's, really, I guess, emotionally honest. This is sort of a left field thought, but they all look so fit, with the exception of Choco Williams. And it's interesting, there seems to be a whole club mantra about fitness, and even Purdy seems to be fit in the vision that I've seen. And it's as if they're sort of collectively, they've all, invested in their fitness and their health. And, it's interesting, he talked about needing to free up as a coach and to enjoy things more, and that the pressure was getting to him. And I heard tonight Tom Brown say that there was a emergency board meeting earlier in the season. Who knows if this is true, to put his contract on the agenda and talk about finishing. It's the implication was that was the trigger for Kate Roffey to become president, because the majority of the board said that's ridiculous. Why were we even talking about this? And it's be interesting if that's true. Kate Roffey's sort of definitely got to be in there as part of where we've got to. She's obviously been involved for a long time, but as president, she's been awesome. And that was really interesting. And I think that sort of pressure that was put on him last year after the Port game, there's a lot behind there. And I reckon I love Goody, and I think that I just go back to what he said when he first became coach, that you want to see an identifiable game plan, and we're seeing it. So he's delivered what he promised, and all of the fugazi that he talks about, he's done, struggled with, I think, at different times. He's lived it. His players love him, but he's also, I think that, again, I'll come back to this a lot, is that he's just underrated tactically. People like, he's brought something new to the game right now. 140 points in a grand final. This is crazy. This is a huge number from a defense. Everyone's talking about it. We're a defense-first football team. Well, hold on. We've scored 100 plus points now for 7 weeks. 7 games, I should say. We're averaging 106 points a game for the last 7 games we've won. We've just 140 points and 120 against Geelong. This is pretty crazy stuff in terms of what he's bringing to the game, and no one's giving him the credit. And then I'm really upset about the fact that he didn't get a chance to speak, because it seems to me it's almost like a continuation of the disrespect that the footy world's often shown Goody. He's probably too much of a gentleman, if that's the right word, to make a big song and dance about it. But I hope someone's having a quiet word to someone, because it was completely disrespectful. It made me really upset to hear the fact that he had notes ready to go, and that, he wanted to talk about bringing the cup home, and that this team and how much they mean to him. I thought the presser with him and Track was just beautiful. It was a really powerful presser, and the fact that he brought, I'm not sure if that's what they normally do, but he brought Track to there, and the sheer love between the two men was quite striking to see.
I think it's also it's too easy to forget what happened just over 12 months ago now, or when Gary Pert did a review of the coaching staff, and he was highly criticised at the time for doing an internal review. But as a result of that review, we've come out with Uze and Williams providing the necessary support to Goody. And I think when you look at what Goody does as a coach, there were elements that needed to be helped. Williams has, without a doubt, provided improved on-ground performance in terms of kicking. All those little lines down the middle of the footballs are actually working. We're developing the players the way that we should. Uze, I think, does a lot in the background that people don't appreciate in terms of tactics. And Goody has always been a relationship man, and that leaves him the time to be able to spend with the players to get the messages across that he's been trying to get. Whereas before he was probably trying to do the whole lot himself, and that probably leads to the circumstances that others have described, and he had his own doubts at the end of 2019, 2020. So all credit must go to Pert and the way that it was conducted, and the board as well, about providing the coach with the resources needed to do the job that he wanted. And if you look back over the last couple of years, there was an identical circumstance occurred at Richmond. With exactly the same sort of thing. There was an identical circumstances down at Geelong, and both of those scenarios led to multiple premierships for both of those sides. Coaching isn't just about the one thing. You need to be able to support the coach as well. You need the players, that's for sure, and you need the right people on the field, but you've got to have the right people off the field to do the job that gets the results.
Including the president.
Including the president,
Yeah.
If you mentioned credit to Pert, and he's the next person I wanted to talk about. So you remember the 4-year plan that they outlaid from 2020 to 2023, and that was one of the things was to play in AFL finals each year. We weren't able to do that in 2020, but COVID, and we know the issues there. We just missed out. Who knows what would have happened in a full season. And then the second point of that was to win at least one AFL premiership, and we've done that quite early in the piece. Hopefully they do continue to make finals, and hopefully we get some more. Then there was all the financial stuff, which COVID has obviously not helped, but us winning the premiership and those merchandise figures that have been bandied about, that I know half of that's come out of my own pocket. That's gonna contribute a lot of money into the club. One of the other was grow the membership to 75,000. We spoke to Purdy the other week. We've got 53 now. We were on track for 60, 65 during this year. If next year we've got a free run at it and no COVID restrictions after a premiership, I thought 75 was an impossible figure. I don't think it's so impossible now. Not sure we'll get to it next year, but we are going to grow a hell of a lot. As long as we have the early wins as well going next year, that'll help out. And the other interesting thing with that, on top of the facilities which we know are sort of coming, was MCG home games averaging 50,000 crowds. If we keep playing the way we've been playing, and we can get full crowds back at the MCG next year, or very close to it, we're going to hit those targets, particularly playing the brand of football we're doing. So credit to Purdy, put out a very bold plan, and despite some of the COVID stuff, where he's delivering on that now. And I think he's also doing a very good job of keeping, retaining and adding new sponsors all the time. So fantastic. Well done, Purdy. He's contributed to what we saw on the weekend as well.
He's welcome on the podcast anytime.
Well, he's virtually part of the furniture. He's actually in my man cave here.
Speaking of sponsors, apparently it was the highest rating grand final in in the donkey's years.
Well, considering we're all locked in our houses, it's not surprising.
Because of the night
At
on
night,
the Eastern, obviously. But so Zurich and all of our sponsors must have just been thrilled with the coverage. Just absolutely, thrilled. The other thing about memberships, I reckon, including me, I didn't get around to doing it this year, but I will next year, is a grand final guarantee ticket.
Well, you got to do that.
Yeah.
If you can afford it, obviously. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. So,
even though I've only
more of them this year, next year, won't they?
Even though I've only have to activate it once because I couldn't do it this year. In 2000, I was able to do it, but highly recommended for the once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, 100%.
Hopefully, it's more than once in a lifetime. But B-Man, before we're all with 3.5 hours into this, you wanted to rant about the so-called experts. Please don't go for an hour.
I'm going to leave it, Andy, for this week because I think, one, I don't want to get started because I may not stop.
We can do it in our review of the year show. We can do it again.
And two, I don't want it to end on a negative. I'll just quickly end on a more positive note to say that last week we had 3 callers and it was Jumping Jack Clement, D Zephyr, and the third one was help me out.
Was it D Trucker, or did he call in last week?
No. I'll think of it in a tick. And the points raised all came to fruition. One of the questions was about Jackson, the influence of Jackson, and he was super influential. So, and then I think Jumping Jack Clement talked about the it was Michael, wasn't it? I think who made that point. And then Jumping Jack Clement talking about the umpires, and I thought the umpires were brilliant. There were a couple of things that happened, but we've hardly commented on them. I thought they did a fantastic job.
There were two ones that I wasn't happy with in particular. There was Viney was sort of taken high, or at least he was bending over the ball and got high. And then 2 seconds later, he did the same thing and got pinged for it. All right, that can happen. Cozzy was taken too high.
Yeah, Cozzy was taken too high. But all 3 of them were balanced out by the fact that Gus wasn't paid a free kick against him.
That was 100% a free kick.
Into Shaki.
How was that not a free kick? And that would have been. That was at a bad time as well because we just got in front, so they would have got back in.
I would have gone bananas because it was a critical point in the match.
Absolutely,
he would have had a shot on goal, and he's a pretty good. He might have.
He would have kicked that. He would have been straight in front.
But went up the other end, and we scored a goal.
Yeah, I know that. I'd be livid.
Yeah. That was, and he was right there. The umpire was right in front of it. So it was a gutsy thing by Gus to do, but Jesus, that was definitely. But I thought they did a great job. They let things go. I thought that was fantastic umpiring.
Sucks to be them. They've had the umpires all year, so glad they missed one.
Yeah, and then the third one was D Zephyr's point about the importance of Salem and that he's sort of flown under the radar, and basically exactly what he said came to, like, he was so important in the grand final for all of the reasons that D Zephyr. So I thought it was really cool that last week the 3 callers we had all nailed points that ended up being really big factors or important factors in the grand final. So rather than ranting about the so-called experts, I'll big up and pay respect to our Demonland experts who are calling in. So
Fantastic. I love that. That's really great. I want to thank all of our callers tonight. I want to thank Bin Man. I want to thank George. I want to thank all of our listeners for listening. What a year. This is incredible. It still feels so surreal. It's so good seeing all the vision of all the players celebrating and enjoying it. The only thing, not a regret, but the fact that they're not here and we can't do anything yet. But I know that in the new year we will get together and we'll get to celebrate and see that cup and cheer the players in person. Can't wait for the unfurling of the flag next year. I can't wait to hopefully can get a chance to touch that cup. It's good times ahead. Let's never want this feeling to stop, but it's great to be at the top, and we thoroughly deserved it. And go Demons!
Go Red Legs!
It's a great flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. We're the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing this song to you.